All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to Bubble Man's World, and welcome to Hash Church episode 138. 138 Sundays that we have been gathering here at this little spot here in this little corner of the internet. Of course, I'm going to send out some invitations to everybody so we can get some people in the room. Hopefully, I can actually get my invitations out again today because I am having sometimes a problem with my emails lately. So let me just find out. See if Mr. Chimera wants to join the party. And we will figure that out real quick.
Good morning, sir. Happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Yes, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. I meant to say that as well. My bad. Thank God for Etienne, Mr. Class showing up and representing for the moms.
Do you know where? Happy Mother's Day as well, Mark. Do you know where Mother's Day started, everyone?
Please tell us.
Fairmont, West Virginia.
I thought Philadelphia.
That's Fairmont, West Virginia. Mother's Day and Father's Day are centrally located out of Fairmont, West Virginia.
So the sign in Philadelphia is incorrect that it started there.
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
But, leave it. West Virginians aren't necessarily always known to be correct. Remember, they misspelled Monongalia and the Monongahela River forever. So they kind of have this issue, and I love all West Virginians. Don't get me wrong, but I served out of Morgantown. Out of Morgantown, West Virginia, and the unit was out of Fairmont, West Virginia. So they had a plaque and have a statue for Mother's Day there. So
interesting, because Philadelphia, it's like part of like their whole. They have a plaque. John Wanamaker, the famous starter of the Wanamaker store chain, I think, which was a big department store back in the day, kind of like a Macy's kind of place. I think had something to do with it, and I'll try to find a picture of the sign online because I know that everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Mother's Day started in Philly. It's all on the news and everything like that." But we'll have to get to the bottom of this.
This is where Joe Rogan would have his guy on the side. Be Googling and searching. So welcome Dr. Natasha to the room, Mr. Schaldone, and a Topsy-Turvy Sam is in the room, and of course Mr. Todd McCormick and Etienne Fontaine.
I'm doing yoga.
Yoga.
That's a stretch, man.
Dude, that's heavy dude. I don't even know what to say to that, but that's funny. How was the conference the other day there, Natasha? Not the one that we were at, but the one that you went to after.
Hey, everybody. So I've been on the conference circuit, checking out a lot of different speakers. So the conference Marcus is referring to was put on by the Natural Just wait, I want to get the title right. It's NHP, Natural Health Products Society of Canada. So they put on a conference from Monday to Thursday. I just attended the Thursday sessions, which was all based on cannabis. So it was nice. Dr. John Page spoke, Dr. Zach Walsh, who was on Hash Church before, talking about his work with cannabis and PTSD. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Mahmoud Asoli, hopefully I'm saying that right, was also speaking. And so Marcus, you said that Todd may have some guests on today who were part of the medical cannabis program in the US. So Dr. Asoli was the director of this program. So hearing him speak was interesting. Me and Zach Walsh rolled our eyes a few times at each other across the room with some of the comments and claims he was making. And
give me an eye roller. Give me an eye roller.
Yeah.
Give me an example of an eye roller from El Soli.
Well, first off, the slides I don't think have been updated since the first time he's made a presentation. The images were of things they were confiscating off the streets were things that I don't think are really around anymore, like Thai sticks. That was actually my first time seeing a picture of that. Like I've heard of them, obviously seen them historically, but I don't know if anyone, that's really a hot item on the street right now. So that was interesting. And then he was describing the whole process of how their group got the bid that came up every 3 years, and their group was simply doing the best job, and that's why they got the bid. And then he was showing pictures of their technology, which honestly looked like people who had bought a few pieces of equipment in their garage. Like, really, it was, okay, I've seen top of the line. This was not top of the line from these images anyway. And then also just said there was no, this was a big eye roller, there was really no interest from anyone for growing medical cannabis for the government. So they just kept getting the bid because they were the best and there was no competition. And then the big eye roller was when he was trying to convince us all that everybody preferred the low THC strains to the higher THC strains, and that was actually the way it was. And so it was just, yeah, so wow. Zach Walsh finally asked a question about that and was like, sorry, can you just clarify that? And he I mean, Osoli had a okay enough explanation. He was saying since they were using these lower THC, I think 4 to 5% THC cigarettes in the studies, and the patients had to consume the entire cigarette for the study. From that perspective, they preferred the lower THC since they had to consume the entire cigarette versus just having a few puffs and
that's not exactly true. I've talked to several of the federally approved medical patients, and they told me point blank they preferred the weaker stuff. They didn't like the strong stuff that people have.
All right, well then I guess that is what was happening, and so he was describing that, and but just from Zach Walsh's perspective of the research he'd been doing with his PTSD patients, that wasn't his perspective. So they had an interesting discussion. So yeah, it was overall awesome to see him speak. But
Doctor, when your base is only of your research is now only 2 people, that's not a lot of research to go on. No offense to Elvie and to Irvin, however,
that's the only thing they know.
Everybody
but you have to also understand, Dr. Natasha, it's also in comparison, because I've been around Elvie when she had the 2 to 3% back in the early 90s tins, and she didn't like those and told me how she didn't like them compared to the 4 to 5% that she's getting now. Both were usually processed between 7 to 10 years prior to her receiving the actual tins. However, as Todd was showing you, one of the actual tins he had before him that comes with these joints, and it's very low grade, but yeah, Dr. Natasha, I had people tell me that when they met them at the ICRS, Dr. Nasoli, when he saw the Great Book of Buds, thought that the book was fictitious because he'd never seen buds of that caliber or quality before. And so out of that, we sent him a full set of the 1, 2, and 3 of the Great Book of Buds, as well as the Cannabible, so that he could study and understand some of it. Even though the information in there is not completely correct, it was still getting that information toward them. So I thought he was full of shit when he said that originally, that, I couldn't believe that there's high-grade marijuana like that. They've been testing it and dealing with that for years, so I'm not surprised they sold you that load of bullshit, Doctor.
When I was at Dr. El Sole's lab about 30 years ago, he showed me some cannabis that had been seized by the DEA in Alaska, and it tested at 29% THC. That was marijuana. So he has seen it, and he has grown it, believe me.
Was that Matanuska?
Can I show you guys something funny? So this is one of the empty cans that was given to as collection. And what's hilarious is when you look at the growth on this, it literally says manufactured March 2001, right? But then you spin this shit around and you'll see that it was passed out in 2009. Are they literally trying to prove that it can't work? What are they trying to do? You know, what is the
Well,
point?
you understand. I know the guy who rolls those joints. He's an old friend of mine. He works with Dr. Osole. He works at Research Triangle Institute.
Does he
And
wash his hands after he go to bathroom?
well, but let me finish. So what he does is he's required by the government to roll these joints, and it's a contract, and he's to roll them with the Bonsack cigarette rolling machine. I'm very familiar with the machine. I've used one myself. It's a giant fucking machine that's like, 10 meters long and rolls one big giant joint that long, cigarettes, and then it cuts them with razor knives, all automatically. And he would foul the machine if he ran even his lousy Mexican through it. So what they would do first is dry the material and sift it and remove what they call fines. What fines are is resin and very small particles of cannabis. And the resin fucked up the cigarette rolling machine, so they removed the fines and made extracts with them for research. And what you got was pretty much like you're saying, 5-10-year-old weed. All the terpenes are gone because terpenes just don't stick around that long. And the what you get is resinless weed, basically.
Isn't that an old Pall Mall machine? I saw a High Times article that came out in the 70s that actually showed them with an old Pall Mall machine. I think, is that what you're talking about?
No, they use a Bonsack machine. That's the brand.
Well, they were even showing how they were processing the cannabis, and yeah, they were saying, oh, we don't grow it every year. We don't have to grow it every year, which is a bit shocking. And then they're showing how they're processing it and grinding it down to look like oregano, and then putting it in these big tubs and then storing it like that, which is interesting to see. And Mark Sheldon, your name came up, not during the talk, but I was hanging out with some of the chemists and natural food chemists after, and one of the Dr. John Page brought up your name and said, because we were kind of describing how some of the techniques they were discussing weren't necessarily the most up to date for analysis, and so there may not actually be as many cannabinoids as they're claiming. And then Mark, your point you brought up when we were in Boston at CanMed, and how when we were hanging out with John Page, and you said it might be the bacteria breakdown products. So I think that's why you were asking, did they wash their hands? So that's pretty interesting.
Well, so they came out with a paper, I want to say it was in 2008 in Journal of Natural Products, and he reported the discovery of these new cannabinoids and isolation of these new cannabinoids. And they're actually not cannabinoids. They're all metabolic degradation products. And a hallmark sign of bacterial degradation is bacteria starts to oxidize things indiscriminately, and it starts putting hydroxyl groups all over the place. And so all his new were basically fungal metabolites, because his weed is all moldy. And it makes sense, right? They're growing weed down in the bayou, down in Mississippi. Of course it's going to mold if it's not properly taken care of. And so all of those hydroxyl metabolites kind of are en route to making CBN, because when they heat up on a nail, they thermally eliminate and they'll make CBN. So it was interesting that they reported the discovery of these so-called new metabolites. These metabolites have been known for a long time, and they're just oxidation byproducts that are formed on properly or improperly cured weed.
So is that aerobic decomposition, basically? It's the after effects?
Yeah. No, it's not anaerobic, it's aerobic. Right? It's happening in the air. It happens. I mean, it's funny because when you look at the tin that Todd held up, I mean, I guess back in the day, back in the 70s, maybe not for guys like Sam who were rolling around on the West Coast in Indra, but for those of us on the East Coast, man, that kind of like dirt weed was the weed that we had. It was kind of like,
because I started
Mexican.
It was kind of
moldy.
But that was
when I smell moldy weed now reminds me of the way that weed used to smell when I first started smoking in like 1974 and 75. So it seemed like back then, a lot of it was probably like ditchweed brought up from Mexico and stuff like that. But I think to me, the smell of weed was almost like a mold smell. And I will bet you $1 to a donut, that's exactly what they're growing down there at the Schwag Farm, Mississippi, right, Todd?
Well, let me say it like this, though. It isn't because as a grower who's been growing since I was a little kid, you know, most cannabis is destroyed after it's harvested. And if you have cannabis in this situation that was literally grown in, literally it says, manufactured March 2001, and they sat on it for 8 years, it's going to have a natural degradation. It's a sexual material.
Is it like...
Say
like
again?
when they cure it, do they freeze it? Like after the curing, do they put it in the deep freeze?
I think they're destroying it. I think that, you know, you and I both know that cannabis starts to naturally break down after about 9 months. It's a vegetable material. So
you think it's stored for like 8 years in just like a plastic bag or a tub or something?
No, I bet you it's frozen.
They have a 55-gallon container. They grind it all down into. Now, I would anticipate that it's either frozen or stored refrigerated, but I have seen them when they grind it all down and they just put it into a 55-gallon drum, and then I would have assumed then they just feed that right into the machine. Correct,
Next
Sam?
week, we will have both.
As far as I know, it was frozen, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was definitely kept in big, giant barrels for extended periods of time.
Well,
My
next
10-year-old still has
until recently, when Sue Sisley's study unearthed that the NIDA farm was growing moldy weed, had they ever tested their weed or any of their cannabis for pathogens or for bacteria or mold?
I'm not sure. You should check the literature and see, or ask Dr. Osole. He'll tell you.
Next week, I'll have both LV Musica and Irvin Rosenfeld, who are the last 2 people that receive marijuana from the federal government, or medical cannabis, I should say. They're here for a Patients Out of Time conference. So we'll have both of them on the show next Sunday.
Nice.
So we could ask them some questions and talk to them about it. They are literally the last 2 patients from the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program to still be getting cannabis from the government. So
maybe the panelists that have an urge to show up next Sunday could maybe spend the next week coming up with a few good questions that we could help direct the dialogue with both those guests. Always nice if we can put that little bit of energy in to make the show flow a little nicer.
Todd, are you going to be at Patients at a Time?
Not so much. I mean, I'm kind of, you know, after 2 decades, I'm a little on the burnout of listening to all this stuff. I mean, all we're doing is regurgitating a lot of information that I've already read in most cases. So I love seeing my friends. I love playing host, but no. Are you going to go?
Yeah, I'm going to be there. So
come be one of the friends that visits me.
yeah. No, that would be amazing. So I get in on the Thursday. And so the conference is the Friday and the Saturday. And then Saturday I'm leaving. I'm going to visit Martin Lee's area of California, Northern California. So I'll be there for a few days. But that would be amazing if we could actually meet in person and visit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, come on through. I was going to have a little party on Saturday night, but if you're doing that, that's fine. But if you have time, for sure. I wish I'd known sooner. I could have offered you a guest room.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended Patients at a Time last year in Baltimore and really enjoyed the conference. So we just had our Cannabis Hemp Conference and Expo here in Vancouver that Salome put on. She was on here previously. But Patients at a Time has a similar vibe for anyone who wants to check it out. It is way bigger, but I found it really a nice blend of researchers, doctors, patients, police, advocates, like the whole community who has a interest in cannabis to help people really come together. And I mean, everyone from hardcore business suit guys to hippies and their bare feet sitting on the floor, all coming together and interacting and talking about cannabis. And I found the conference really great. Last year, Ethan Russo invited me to speak about cannabis roots and the potential that they would have for treating inflammation. And even just all the different growers and people who had been throwing out their cannabis roots who came up and were like, oh, we're going to do stuff with these now. So I'm excited to even connect with old friends, and I won't be speaking this year, but so I'll just get to attend, won't have to worry about speaker nerves and those kinds of things. But yeah, Ethan Russo is speaking again. My friend and colleague, Dr. Caroline McCollum, will be speaking about cannabis for pain. Dr. Dave Hepburn will be speaking. Dr. Bonnie Goldstein will be speaking. So yeah, it'll be a good meeting. I saw lots of those people speak at CanMed in Boston with Mark, and yeah, so I'm excited to check out the America scene.
For you, what's better, fresh roots or dried roots? Or
I think it depends on what your application is. So fresh roots, there's a history of using them just straight up. You can grate them and put them straight on a wound, but obviously there's water, so they're not going to last as long. The roots can be dried, and there's also a history of use of even making like once you dry it and make a powder, you make almost like a paste. And there's some reports of people even using it for everything from wound care to bone setting. So personally, I haven't worked with the dried powder form, but there's definitely applications.
I've seen people use roots in third world countries where cannabis was a traditional crop, and a lot of it was like you said, for skin abrasions or skin problems or cuts or things like that, and they all claimed it helped.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. How were people using it in a variety of ways, or what were you seeing?
As far as I know, it was fresh, but I didn't see them make the preparation. They just told me about it.
And fresh, like were they making?
Can I ask? Has anybody tested roots for cannabinoids?
Yes. So
what you got? What you got?
Sorry, yes. So there are no cannabinoids in the root. So they've been tested by, I'm forgetting his name. It was a poster. Park, I think is his last name, was the first person who's credited with testing them. It was on a poster abstract presented at a conference, but then John Page's group, or I don't know if it was his group, but he's on the paper anyway, and they tested, and they tested the precursors and found that there was no cannabinoids in the roots, but there's other compounds. So there's fritoline and epifritoline, and these are triterpenoids that
that's it.
Yeah, they have anti-inflammatory activity, and they're also found in other plants. So they've been isolated and studied from other plants, but these compounds in roots haven't been studied. And then there's also these cool alkaloids like cannabisatidine that have been isolated from the roots, specific to cannabis as far as we know, but no other research has been done, and lots of potential. Do these compounds have anti-inflammatory activity? Long history of use for cannabis roots being used topically for not only skin abrasions, but gout. So gout, I think why it would help with gout is because it would calm redness, inflammation. And so Ethan Russo and I we have a lit review we put together of the cannabis roots. So we're still kind of fishing out where to publish it right now. We submitted it to one place, and unfortunately, I named the title of the piece Cannabis Roots, and the people who were reviewing it thought we were talking like back to the roots of cannabis, not the actual rhizomes. And so
didn't they bother reading it?
That was my question.
They didn't. The criticisms are humorous. One reviewer who actually read it loved the paper. Another reviewer who read it but didn't quite understand it at least had some constructive criticisms. And then there were two other reviewers who you could tell didn't even read the paper because they're mad because I haven't reviewed THC, I haven't reviewed CBD. I'm like, read the first sentence. I'm telling you these compounds are not in the roots. And they're like, she's missing all this and she's not talking about this. And I'm just like, oh. So yeah, we just, instead of, usually when you submit a paper for peer review to get it published in an academic journal, it's a long process. And by the time you get to this point, normally you would write a rebuttal and say like, and I put that through the process, but after looking at the reviews, it's just like, they don't even understand what we're trying to write about here. So we're going to move to our next journal. So anyway.
Marcus, isn't that your motto? Try terpenes?
Yes, exactly. Try terpenes. I have a question in regards to the triterpenoids that have been found in the roots. Do we know if they've been found on a gland in the roots or if they've just been found inside the actual, where are these terpenes being produced in the plant? If they're on the roots, where? In the actual fiber of the roots? How are these compounds produced?
Well, terpenes are ubiquitous all throughout the plant, right?
Well, I'm asking how they're produced. The only terpenes that I knew about the plant were the ones that were being produced inside the vacuoles and the plastids, the organelles that produce the phenols and the terpenes in the first place. I was under the understanding
The isoprene pathway is ubiquitous in most plant cells, and that's the way the terpenes, like the terpenes that you're finding in the trichomes, the reason why you're not finding those terpenes down in the roots is because they're not serving the plant any purpose down in the roots. And like Dr. Natasha said, she was talking about alkaloids are nitrogen containing compounds, and it's interesting to notice how free the essential oil of the trichome is from nitrogen containing compounds. And nitrogen containing compounds don't always cleanly volatilize. They sometimes decompose to something called Hoffman degradation. But it's like, I think what happens, Mark, is it shows that the cannabinoid biosynthesis, which is, as far as I know from Paul Malberg's work, is happening primarily, the engine of cannabinoid synthesis happening in the trichome, but there might be some systemic delivery through, again, these other compounds that, you know, Natasha is talking about here, like the nitrogen-containing alkaloids.
might be as in you have papers to show that, or this is just a theory?
No, this is plant science. This is
Well,
known.
Mark, wouldn't terpenes be useful to the roots too? There are a lot of insects that attack the roots. So if the terpenes are useful to a plant above ground, they would be useful to a plant below ground.
It makes sense because down in the roots is where nitrogen fixation happens, and that's one of the reasons why I think some of these nitrogen-containing compounds are down in the roots. And I think if it serves no purpose, like there's no purpose for myrcene to be down in the roots, it would just be bacteria food. So it's secreted up in the trichome where it's serving the plant purpose. If it's not serving the plant purpose, there's not going to be any reason for those compounds to be down in there.
So nobody knows whether it's actually produced in a gland in the roots or in the actual fiber.
Well, Mark, you look up triterpene and it says any group of terpenes found in a plant, gums and resins having unsaturated molecules based on the unit formula, blah, blah, blah. So the gums and the resins are definitely, like, I think, secreting from the plant in all places.
They're everywhere though, and they're serving the plant a surface, some kind of purpose. They're everywhere. That's why I say ubiquitous. They're all throughout the plant.
I've actually tested some of the roots on the GC, and I'm just sitting here. Tim Powell is from here in Vancouver. He's been testing for Dr. Sharman at the Green Cross, and he's saying that they've had some minute amounts of THC or cannabinoids in roots. And I was wondering if that had to be with strain specifics, maybe something strains might be able to have. I've seen it in my machine, just little
I bet you
bleeps,
it's an SOP.
but I've never seen it like register on it saying it was what it was. But just by the little marks on the GC, it's showing me that there must be something at that level. Like, you know what, like Mark would know, like at 6 minutes and 28 seconds, it's showing me a little bloop on my thing saying I'm not seeing it, but it's showing me a little thing there saying that there might be some CBD in some of the roots or something like that. So my question was, could it be done to the strain, or could it be there might be some other things that we're looking at and we have
at this point, I think it's probably, like Marcus just said, an SOP error, something wrong with, maybe there's some contamination getting into it if it's low levels, because in the studies where they measured them, they were looking at precursor compounds in the roots, and they didn't find any evidence of that. So it doesn't seem like the roots have the capabilities to actually make the cannabinoids. So I'll post the papers in the chat below so you guys can check it out.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Well, there you
thanks.
go, researchers who are watching. You know, we need some more root research, needless to say, because we know there's got to be beneficials. And I knew when you were starting to discuss that, just talking about the lignin in the plant itself, it goes all throughout. So, I mean, it's yeah, I could definitely see beneficials, but could definitely see, just as we see plant specific, there probably would be root specifics, but that's just here's conjecture.
And before I forget, sorry, I just want to make sure I say, for anyone who's listening and wants to start experimenting with the roots, just be careful, because the roots also absorb bad minerals as well as good things. So they're often used for phytoremediation, as Marcus can explain a little bit more about, because he was involved in some projects with that. But be careful, because they can absorb dangerous minerals. So if you're taking them internally, just be careful. So make sure, like, if you're going to use the roots edibly or internally, make sure they're grown in soil that is free of contaminants.
And that's another thing when I did some testing. I mean, I just roots that I used, right? So who knows? But yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, with resin, SOP would be very, very important in regards to testing something on that level. You would definitely want to make sure that you don't have little invisible resin glands stuck to the material that you're running, or for sure resin would show up on your spike. I had one root story. In 1995, when we got our first permit to grow hemp experimentally in Manitoba, just outside of Winnipeg, we had a little 5-acre field, and we'd go visit it and hang out in it. We were just, you know, as young activists, I can't really tell you how amazing it was to be able to be involved in a time where within 1 year of becoming a cannabis activist, we had a field of cannabis growing in our province for the first time in over 73 years. It was just the timing. I don't think we did anything any more special than the people. We just happened to be an important little cog right in that timing that we got blessed. So we got to visit this field, and we, because of it, got to learn a lot about these plants. And one of the things that I did, I'll never forget how much it blew my mind. After a great cannabis session in my Volkswagen van that I had parked in the middle of the 5-acre plot, we had a little sort of roadway, very small little path going through the field, and I could get my little Volkswagen van in there. So we had a nice session in there with my friends, and went out to the field, and we were all looking at the plants, and we were just, we'd hug these plants, we'd rub these plants and smell these plants and bend them over, and, you know, everything. And so at one point in time, I just looked at one, they were quite tall, and I just pulled it right out of the ground. I just plunk, ripped the whole plant, roots, everything out. And when I turned it upside down and I followed the taproot, at the end of the taproot was the husk of the seed that the entire plant had come from. Now, I at the time thought this must be the rarest, most never before seen thing, but we pulled out a few more plants and were actually surprised at how many of these Zolotonosha 13s, I think it was 11 and 13 before the 15, that had these little seeds cracked open. Have you seen that before, Sam?
Can I? Well, go ahead, Sam.
Absolutely, I've seen it a million times.
It's quite phenomenal. Like, it's something that happens, but I'll tell you,
it's to me, it's like the full circle. Not only that, the other thing I've seen is I saw big giant skunk plants being grown in Orinda, and it had rained, and a couple branches were. It wasn't a real greenhouse. It was just like a roof part of a greenhouse. And some of the plant's branches were really big, and they were sticking out, and they got wet in the rain. And I came and visited maybe about a week after the rains, and it was still sprinkling, and about 100 seeds had sprouted at the end of this one branch that I had seeded on purpose. So the plants were like, 4, 5, 6 inches tall coming out of the branch. And talk about full circle. It's the same thing.
Wow, that's amazing.
In my experience, I've seen it when seeds were planted upside down, and instead of the seed being attached to the leaf when the thing comes up, it actually gets pushed down, but the soil was loose enough so that when it opened, the plant turned around and went up anyway. But that's what I think might have happened, because usually the seed is attached to the first leaf. What's that leaf called, Sam? The one that doesn't look like a cannabis plant?
I'm dyslexic, but it's a cotyledon. I'm not pronouncing it right.
It's the cotyledon.
Yeah, and it's usually attached to that little leaf when it makes its way up.
Yes. I just posted a picture the other day showing the resin glands on the first set of true leaves, which is called the epicotyl. and that had just covered in resin glands, bulbous, obviously, but
I remember.
resin glands
Did it
nonetheless.
make any difference what the photo period was to do that?
To produce resin glands on a seedling?
Yeah.
No, they're just always there. I've never not seen them.
Well, one time I remember I grew a Chinese variety. This was like 40 years ago. And I planted it really late in the year after all the other cannabis had been harvested. And it got 3-4 inches tall, flowered, and that was it.
Interesting.
And so the photo period was too short for it in California.
That'll do. That'll happen sometimes.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Remember that? What was that pine tar kush that you cleaned? The pine tar. It was quite amazing. Remember, I had that little jar you took some out of in the beginning. I left it sitting out for about a week. Look at the color, because you were talking about this in the beginning. Look at, because remember you cleaned this. Look at how it's changed.
Looks like it's buttered out a bit, eh?
But it's the color. Now this was the stuff that we took out, and then you cleaned it, which made the stuff that's still white. Yeah, you remember this.
Here's mine.
I got a little bit here, but this was the beginning stuff that was still clear that you cleaned. So you took this and you cleaned this. That made, of course, this. But I was going to make mention. I took it out of the fridge. I left it on the counter, went away for 5 days, came back, and that had completely changed the color.
Dude, room temperature definitely does that. When we were talking earlier about the 10-year-old herb and how like that, I'll tell you, like herb, yes, I wouldn't want 10-year-old herb, but some 10-year-old hash. This hash is so tasty, so delicious. It's got the most unique bouquet of any hash I have by far, and it's like it's marshmallowy. It's really like
that's best way of saying it. This is marshmallowy now, but that was just a period of like just a week when it's hot upstairs in my room. So if you leave your jar of hash out, this is probably what's going to happen. That's why I was keeping it in the fridge.
I left this one out for 10 years as well, but I have no lid on it. And listen to it. It's as hard as a rock. It's like, it's rock hard lava. It's insane.
I was just thinking, when you're talking about that in the beginning about that degradation and then the hash that you have and then what I'm seeing, I mean, people see this all the time, but you know, this is the reasons why, guys. Right? Yep. And it smells like amazing.
And that was contaminant.
Exactly. And this is the clean.
Yeah, well, that's usually how it adds up. This is the clean, meaning there's almost none left, scraped down to the bottom, and yeah, then you know something like that is the full. This is the 09 cookies that I just haven't hit for a while because I've been enjoying this this Congo rosin that I got.
So John, we missed you at Cannabis Hemp Conference.
I know, and I so wanted to be there, so I just started clicking on Mark's link like late last night to watch it.
Tell us about what was happening in Calgary, because you were at a different conference.
Calgary Lift was really quite amazing. It was very, very busy. A lot of people wanted to stop by. They were asking a lot of questions. People wanted to know more about curing. It was interesting because, of course, we had the Boba booth beside us. Across us was Aurora. Then we had Fant, and when we had the whole kind of, I guess, right in the center there. But overall, I would say that it was a really fantastic event. A lot of people really I talked a lot about it. It was a lot of business to business, I would say. A lot of people walking around asking a lot of questions about what's going on with the industry, what's happening in 2018. There's an interesting crowd, but overall, I mean, like everything for me, I always love it because the people that we get to meet there and talk to that, of course, mentioned Hash Church and everybody else on the panel, and I've been wanting to say hi. I couldn't log in. There was no reception there, so I wasn't able to bring you guys to see the event. But overall, like every time I spent Monday just kind of relaxing and soaking up a little bit of Calgary. Came home Tuesday, and it was, you know, just kind of going through the cards now and contacting some people to see what people are thinking about doing for 2018 with legalization was a big talk. I think a lot of people want to know what's going to be happening here in Canada because that's what's happening.
Did you see the Tokyo Smoke gentleman's talk?
Yes. Well, I didn't see the talk. I went over and talked to them, though.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I just want to, before you tell that story, just let everyone know that Ellen was doing a talk, but the title was a bit humorous because it was basically the future of branding in cannabis, and they had just had their issues with the bong. So anyway, please tell us how your conversation went.
Well, I just kind of was that whole thing about branding. I was asking, what Canada's doing about, not being able to brand any cannabis products and stuff. But they didn't really get into the bong. He didn't want to talk about the $13,000 bong, and it was the only bong. You know what? It was a brief little kind of conversation.
Johnny P, you should have said one thing to him. You should have said, "So how's that working out for you?"
And it was just two guys at a booth. I was like, so how's the 13th? And
You
they just kind of like, make it this way. It was the conversation was about as long as this, okay, and then it changed. So there wasn't really too much of a conversation. I think there was a lot of backlash on that. A lot of people were saying that the only bong, and people were talking about it, but I didn't get too much into the politics of it, to be honest.
Is anyone else puffing today?
I see you're hitting it. I got to get right in here.
I was the first one puffing. I've taken a few because I have all my dabbers loaded, and I'm down 3. So I guess I'm on to 4 now.
I got the first bounce. I got the stuff that falls right directly underneath the plant.
Hey, D, lull in conversation, and since you're sifting there with your hood on, will you announce, please?
Bong rip, mother lovers.
Oh my gosh. I just had a good size bong rip, mother lubber.
You look like Sir D 420.
Someone asked if he changed his religion.
No, he's going to put on the rest of his night uniform.
That's what I was thinking. It doesn't look as much like a burqa as much as like he's a knight.
A knight.
It's a dust mask.
Ready to go out and destroy.
Because of this sifting, it gets up my nose and I get like almost like a sinus infection from the dust. So
You sneeze a lot. I sneeze a lot.
I put the t-shirt around the head and ninja mask up.
Yeah, it does. It does mess with your mucous membrane a bit.
Yeah. But I'm going to do another bong rip because that first one was so tasty. I need another. So bong rip again, mother lovers.
That's when my old man, not that he was a puffer, but if he liked something and enjoyed it, he'd be like, you know what that tasted like? Another one. And so, yeah, cheesy dad joke on this Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there once again. Thanks for making us all. Wow. What a huge.
Has it say it too? Yeah. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms, and happy Mother's Day, Mom. I know you're watching. Love you.
So, who here is smoked with their mother? Raise your hand. Lucky sumbitch. My mom never smoked. She referred.
Now I got to just say something though, and it's Happy Mother's Day. Thanks, John, for making me feel like I had to say that. I love my mom. If it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't be a stoner. And I love her very much.
If it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't be
here. That's a good point too. Good point too.
Now, I give props to my dad as well. He was involved, not for quite as many of the variables. He's kind of like the hash maker of the two, whereas mom was the grower. She really had to put up with months and months of variables to produce the proper genetic expression. And I do appreciate her for all of that. I definitely do.
You were quite the collab project. I like the one of one that turned out.
Yeah, it was a good collaboration, you know? And so, yeah, I get to, of course, take my lovely wife and family today for I would say maybe possibly, I'm thinking the Krasnopolski in Amsterdam in Dam Square does have a pretty swanky buffet, like a couple of times a year. They do a big special one. Even just the breakfast buffet is ridiculous. But this one in Vancouver is ridiculous. They hire high-end chefs. They have all these different like satellite areas where chefs are preparing food. It's the most ridiculous, giant ice sculptures and chocolate fountains, and it will be amazing. So we get to do that after Hash Church today. So I'm pretty excited.
Drop a little hash in the chocolate fountain, make things interesting.
You know what? It's a real family affair, and although the joke,
I'm always kidding.
It reminds me of Breeder Steve's wedding when he passed me a half pound of grapefruit nugs and said, hey, make some brownies for my wedding. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just like gave it to my wife and was like, hey, make some brownies for Steve's wedding. She made these brownies with this half pound of grapefruit that literally destroyed people. Like 3 people left on stretchers at his wedding, all of which were doctors, and not just doctors, but like well-published, kind of famous in their circle doctors. So when they showed up at this little hospital in Sauble Beach, Ontario, like all the people that were working came to see them because they were like, who's here? Are you kidding me? And so-and-so and so and so the first one to go out was a Jamaican woman, and I'll never forget listening to her out of the corner of my ear saying to the guy walking around with the brownies, give me 2, I'm Jamaican. And so she ate 2 of them while she left on a stretcher. And I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form. Her arms were doing this on the stretcher. And I could hear her as she got wheeled away. She said, I feel like I'm flying. It was the most amazing audio clip of a high person, of an extremely straight high person, who basically felt like because they were from Jamaica, that they could consume an ungodly amount of cannabis. I don't think anyone really realized, except one guy. And I'll wrap this story up quick with this full circle. One guy did not eat the brownies. He was sitting there quite smug, kind of laughing before it all happened, and then looking very confident, and as everyone started losing their shit. And this was Steve's uncle. And Steve's uncle was a motorcycle cop who one day came home late at night from work, and unbeknownst to him, Steve had put his special brownies in the freezer. Well, this guy got home and ate the whole fucking tray. Couldn't move for like 2 days, had the worst, most nightmarish experience of his life. And basically when those brownies got passed out at that wedding, he was like, no fucking way. So that's how Breeder Steve got married.
That is hilarious. So my mom texted me, and but I want to share with you all something short and funny. When I was a little kid, my mom had all these like alternative books. One of the alternative books was, of all things, A Child's Garden of Grass. Okay?
I had the album.
So when I was a little boy, I used to sneak this book and read about marijuana because it was like, you know, verboten. And it has a chapter in it, The Dangers of Grass. And it has a beautiful little poem that's really short, and it says, a child should always say what's true and speak when he is spoken to and behave mannerly at table, at least as far as he is able. So then you change and you open the chapter. It says, dangerous effects of grass are, and you find 2 blank pages with this little bit of text that says the dangerous effects of grass are, 1, getting busted. And then it goes on to the next chapter.
Did you have the album?
No, I never heard the live version.
Dude,
so it's only happened in my head.
I never saw the book. But my dad had the album. And man, I'm telling you, I can hear the voices. Listen, you have to figure it out and find it, because there's one scene on that album where it talks about how cannabis like increases, creativity. And there's a scene where the guy's singing in the shower, and then you hear just someone open the shower door and go, hey man, you want some of this joint? And so he takes a couple of puffs, and then he starts singing again. And the way it's done is so fucking awesome. He starts singing, all of a sudden there's a little bit of background music, a lot of background music, backup singers, fucking horn sections. All of a sudden it's just the most fullest, incredible jam, like James Brown's band in the background. Like it's fucking well done. The Child's Garden of Grass.
Any chapters in my life that I have read have been more true than that one chapter about the dangerous effects of grass.
You know why more true is because the less said, the easier to achieve full truth.
But let me say this though. Funny about this was published in I dare I say 71?
Yeah.
Or something like a hell of a long time ago, right? And 1970, okay, same year I was published, basically. And now we know, here we're sitting here, some like 47 years later, and the only dangerous effects of grass really were getting busted. I mean, talk about ahead of their time.
Yeah. Steven Simmons just sent it to me, the link. I don't know if it's copyrighted. Otherwise, I'd play a little bit of it. But yes, it is classic. Him singing in the shower. I remember rolling on the ground and laughing. There's another couple of scenes where Buddy's like, "How to acquire marijuana." You know, it's like there's all these different ways, and it's like trying to like you steal it from your buddy or whatever, where he's like, "Hey, look over there," and you drop that grass and you cut that grass and split. Like just all the funny voices there. To me, you know, I was very young as well. I got turned on to that album. It was for sure, Todd, my first exposure to cannabis. Now, my parents kind of led me to it unwittingly, and I'll tell you a funny story. I was very curious as a child. And so I figured out at a pretty young age, I think it was about 11 or 12, that if you took a battery and you hooked it up to the positive and the negative, and then you touch them both to a piece of metal, you could heat that piece of metal up pretty good, particularly if it was a small piece of metal like a bobby pin. So I got into burning bobby pins and with these little batteries, and I'd heat them up orange hot and be like, oh yeah, burned like 20 or 30 pins. I'm like 12 years old. Then my parents say, "Hey, Marcus, we need to talk to you." And they pull me down and they start talking to me on the side. And they're like, "Listen, you know, we know what this is for." And I'm like, what is it for? And they're like, this is hash oil. This is hashish and oil. This is what you've been doing. And I'm like, I'd never heard those terms in my life before. My parents literally let the cat out of the bag accidentally because I was burning pins with a fucking 6-volt battery.
It was your first rig.
It was my first rig, but I didn't know it. I was just like, oh, it's like, here's Bubble Man.
Had an email.
Here's Bubble Man as a small child playing with safety pins. You know, so
making emails.
My parents gave it up, man. They gave it up. And then I found that album in my dad's collection and was like, what's this? Hashish oil?
I would love to find these guys if they're, you know, the dedication is to Harry Anslinger, former head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have a book. That's pretty advanced knowledge. I mean, this is 15 years before Jack published The Emperor's Wearing No Clothes. This is before Mel Frank was writing articles in Rolling Stone magazine. This really, I would love to know where they picked up on so much of this.
Is that written by Bruce Margolis?
Jack S. Margolis and Cantor's Delicatessen, Hollywood, California, from the authors. This is
I used to eat at Cantor's every night.
I know Cantor's too, right? It just blew my mind to read that, right? Talk about going back to the base. Warning, this is not a good book to hollow out and hide pot in. The whole thing is great.
I just got handed this book this morning. It came out of a box. Connoisseur's Handbook of Marijuana, 1971.
Busting it out, man.
Yeah, I like that, bro. I have a real funny, Lester Grinspoon sent me a second edition of Marijuana Reconsidered. And he said to me, you know, I was going through my books and I found that old one and I wanted you to have it. And I pulled out a first edition of it. And he looked at it and he was on Skype and he could not believe it. He said he didn't even have one. It was a beautiful little funny.
That's awesome. Who had it? Who had the first edition?
I do. I have both. And it has a picture of Lester on the back where he's like Harvard and dapper. And I could show you, actually.
Please do. We would love that. We would love that. We definitely got to get Lester on again to Hash Church. That was so, I mean, I think he's been on twice, but one time I had to split and go see my son play a piano recital. So it was, I think, one of the first Hash Churches I wasn't here for. But my screen was open. Yes, peace, vegan demon. Chat's rolling along lovely. Tobias Ohm says he has the hardback of that. Yep. I'm still unable to send my emails out. Subcool. Todd McCormick, join the chat. Welcome.
So I just picked up this book and I just kind of flipped open. It says "Weed, No Roots in Hell." Look at this page on the back of this book, guys.
It's the Reefer Madness poster. Very classic, yeah.
Lester sent me this black one, which was the second edition, which was very cool. But I happen to have a white first edition, which on the back has a 1969 version of Dr. Grinspoon, which was, his jaw dropped open. He really couldn't.
Dude, that's almost 50 years ago?
Yeah, dude, this is amazing. Yeah. And I was talking to him the other day, and he'll join us in a coming Sunday again.
Really?
Yes. Yep.
Oh,
Really.
Dude.
Yep.
That's awesome. We got to make it a special episode for sure.
Right. Where would medical cannabis be without his work?
Yeah, maybe make sure that anyone that wants to come in on the panel has read the book from cover to cover. It would be a nice discussion to get really into that book and the timeline and the, you know, like he's told some of the stories before about Carl Sagan and, you know, like telling Carl Sagan that maybe he shouldn't be smoking so much weed.
Well, you know what's funny is he went on to write Psychedelics Reconsidered as well. And then he did a compilation storybook, which 18 is in anonymously called 18, what's that one called?
Marijuana, the Forbidden Medicine.
Thank you.
I'm PTSD in that one.
Right. I'm a fan of all of it. I think his story is very powerful. I've always felt that way, that the people who came at this from the loss of life or the close to losing a life just seem to have this incredible, just a different foundation from coming at it from, you know, the other perspectives that are available. It's heavy.
Well, we're proponents, you know, where we realize that it saved our lives and that it could help others. And that was a difficult thing when Dr. Grinspoon reached out to me and asked me if I would, you know, write my piece, but anonymously, so that way I could protect because of federal law, you know, he wanted to protect us. So that's why we all subjected our information anonymously so that we weren't actually, you know, brought forward. But, you know, one of the things that I realized a long time ago as a patient that had survived is that other people could benefit from it and that there weren't spokespeople out there. So I had to become a spokesperson at a certain resolve. And I want to, you know, my wife at the time was very supportive of me actually putting my effort and information out there because I was, you know, working in a hemp industry, but at the same time, I had no idea what influence my voice could have into helping others. So it was a way into, I thank Dr. Grinspoon for giving me the opportunity as well as to lend credence to my own voice to get it out there so I could help other patients and so other people could see that it wasn't just hearsay and conjecture. It was real. It wasn't something that we just made up. It was, these are real people. These are real instances, and that you could benefit from this. At the same time, we empowered other people to find their own voices, which has only spiraled into what we see before us today, which is just more and more people realizing that these aren't people just sitting around getting high. We've actually proven it, you know, through our own survival, and we just want to see other people benefit from it as well.
What a powerful panel that would be to see Lester do his, you know, the book, the panel, all the different groups of people that were involved, having some of them on a show years later talking about the difference of where they were when they got into it and how it came along and how they use cannabis, you know.
A lot of them, he didn't know who they were. They submitted anonymous stories as well through reliable people. If that makes sense.
Interesting. Well, 768 people watching Hash Church Live on this Mother's Day. I hope you guys are going to be treating your moms proper today, or your wives, the mother of your children. Treat them well. These are the ladies in our lives. Bless all the mothers. I'm going to have a bong rip for the moms.
About to say, bong hit for all the moms.
Bong rip for all the moms.
Bong hit with your mom if possible.
Yes, bong rip with your mom if possible. What a blessing.
So speaking of doctors writing up like case reports and getting these stories out, we've been working to get some case reports out with Crohn's and colitis. So these gut disorders that are very devastating. A lot of the people who get them have to, like up to 70% of patients require major surgery, like getting chunks of their intestine removed. So for instance, for ulcerative colitis, for this disease, it affects just the colon typically. And the cure is to completely remove your colon where you have an ostomy bag on your external. So your waste collects in a bag that you have to change every day. And for a lot of these patients, getting to this point is actually relief because they're no longer they actually have some control over their body now because they were basically living such isolated lives because they couldn't leave their home because realistically, they're living on the toilet. It's just chronically going to the bathroom and chronic pain. So these are very serious conditions. I spoke a little bit about cannabis for gut disorders at the Cannabis Hemp Conference this past weekend. Unfortunately, it was during the time of Hash Church. So yeah, I couldn't pop in last week, and too bad, Marcus, you couldn't have seen my talk. It went really well. And we also were part of a medical panel after. It was me, Dr. Zach Walsh, Dr. Ethan Russo, and Dr. Caroline McCollum. So it was about medical cannabis for just Q&A. So we had given our questions before. So I spoke a little bit about, and keep in mind, this audience is a lot of newcomers to the cannabis realm. So they're their first time learning about medical cannabis. And a lot of them are unsure and haven't really heard about it before. So the types of questions that I wanted to talk about were like, why would someone want to use topical cannabis? So like on their skin. And so I talked a little bit about it's not just necessarily for pain, but even some skin conditions like inflammatory acne or psoriasis, or even itching disorders. Cannabis is starting to be tested for and explored. And the other thing was suppositories, so cannabis administered intrarectally or vaginally. So I talked a lot about that on the panel, and for a lot of people that's their first time understanding that cannabis can be administered in a number of different ways. So bringing it back to this case report, so we've put together it was a male. He was 13 years old when he started using cannabis for his Crohn's disease, which is another form of inflammatory bowel disease. So this one is not just limited to the colon. It can happen anywhere along the gastrointestinal tract, most often in the small intestine. And what's really nasty about this disease is it doesn't just affect the surface of the intestine. So normally these patients get kind of ulcers, or you could think of them like burn wounds that basically don't heal along your gut. So very painful when you eat. Even when you drink water, patients describe it feeling like fire going through their gut. So this particular case, this child basically hadn't been able to find relief from regular drugs. So he had failed steroids, he had failed immune modulators, anti-TNF blockers, and so surgery was his next step. And so he had heard of the success of Colton Turner, who Colton and Wendy have both been on Hash Church before. I think that we did a 5-hour session that time. It was a good talk to hear all about what they're doing. So anyway, we've found another patient who had followed their protocol. So what they're doing is taking pill forms of cannabis 3 times a day, equal amount of THC to CBD. For this child, they had found effective dosing with 3 milligrams of THC to 3 milligrams of CBD. And I think they took it 3 to 4 times a day. And so what's cool about this case report is from the previous data with Crohn's and colitis, it's shown that, like Timna Naftali from Israel, they've done some nice studies looking at smoked high THC cannabis, showing it to be effective for pain relief, even helping patients get back to work, helping them with their diarrhea, helping them with their mood, their sleep. So there's some preliminary data really interesting with smoked cannabis. And I'm sure some of you guys saw the new study that came out with from the same group, Timna Naftali. They looked at low-dose cannabidiol, so low-dose CBD given orally, and found that it was not effective for Crohn's and colitis, which to any of the patients who are taking it, this was kind of obvious because we can't forget about the THC. CBD alone is not going to be good enough for these patients. So what our case report is really cool is we all know high CBD is being used for epilepsy and pediatrics, and people are okay with that. But THC is still being seen as, you know, the bad guy, the scary one. We don't need that. But THC and CBD are completely different compounds. They do completely different things, and they work very well together. So what's really cool is in our case report, we're showing that this child has been using, so from age, I think, 13 to 15, he's been using a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD orally. And we not only have subjective measures, but we have objective measures. So we have serum levels of an inflammatory marker. We also have stool levels of fecal calprotectin, which is a really nice inflammatory marker. And so we can show that his consuming cannabis, his inflammatory levels are reducing. And so we have this case report published just on a website at this point right now. It's still preprint. We basically decided to put it out at this point without peer review, just to attract other cases. So we've actually got another potential 3-year-old that we might add on to the case. And we're still in talks with, of course, Wendy and Colton if they want to include their data in this case report, which can obviously strengthen it and help people realize that for pediatric conditions such as inflammatory bowel disease and other inflammatory conditions that are very painful, THC and CBD together can be effective. And so I was invited to speak in June 1st at the University of Calgary to do a continuing medical education session for gastroenterologists to educate them about cannabis for the gut. Thank you to Selena from the Flower of Life in Kelowna for hooking that up. We had a nice hangout while she was here in Vancouver, her and Stephen and Carolyn. All these connections and people connecting people with legitimate areas to start getting these case reports published, get them out there, and help patients, like you said, Etienne, helping patients feel more confident to speak about how this is working for them. And so people don't just, it's not just, oh, yeah, it's a story. It's like, no, look at this data. We have legitimate, there's a legitimate medical need for these patients. So.
What was the dosing?
Oh yeah, and
Natasha?
it was very low actually. So it was 3 milligrams of THC, 3 milligrams of CBD in a 1-to-1. I don't know, they were still taking it in a brownie kind of rough edible extract. So we don't have complete analysis of what they were actually taking. So keep in mind, this is what the patient is reporting to us. And also I just want to mention, on our case report, we don't have the physician who was actually caring for this patient, because the patient hasn't even told their physician that they're taking cannabis because they're living somewhere where they can't take cannabis. So they moved to Colorado. They're under the compassion care, I'm not sure exactly the correct wording, where they can access cannabis. And so back to what you said, Mark, it's 3 to 3, so 3 milligrams of THC, 3 milligrams of CBD taken 3 times per day. So about 9 milligrams of each total.
Wow. And how did you select that? Did you have another case study that recommended that dosage level? How do you select that?
Our group had nothing to do with that dosing. So they chose this dosing based on Colton Turner and what was successful in his instance. And based on that story alone, this patient's family decided to try it because they were basically at the stage where they were going to get surgery. And they were like, we have nothing to lose, let's try it. It started working. The patient started gaining weight. Right away, the mood improved. Issues resolved, and then when they went back and got their measures, their physician had the legitimate blood markers done at their institution, but doesn't actually know the patient's taking cannabis. So it's like, oh, why are you getting better? So it's still it's confusing, but anyway, yeah. So this is not my patient, or I had nothing to do. All I'm doing is reporting what this patient had been doing on their own. And we submitted this case report to ICRS, so the International Cannabinoid Research Society meeting. That's going to be in Montreal in late June. And just found out yesterday our abstract was submitted. So I'll get to do a poster presentation on this case report and hopefully get the word out more about cannabis for pediatric gut disorders.
It's really frustrating to hear that that's still continuing, that patients are still so intimidated that we can't even tell our physicians. I had to get personal physicians outside of the VA because I had been removed from the VA, even though it was my guaranteed only health care. I couldn't discuss it with them because they physically removed them. So I had to find doctors outside. And this is, just before 215 and then after 215, they don't want you to be out there, because they know that it's going to come back and be reflective onto them, and it could cost them, i.e. their jobs, as well as me, the patient doctor confidentiality is destroyed, and as well as the relationship and the trust, which it's a whole rippling point, and that's why a lot of patients have been reluctant to come forward. And I'm very thankful that people like Colton are out there being very vocal and pushing the envelope so that other patients can see to benefit. But I mean, it's still, I mean, as you understand, doctor, I mean, you need that understanding. But the problem is that due to the pharmaceutically pushed agenda, you can't, because they're being told they have to take these medications. And when you introduce something experimental like this, it costs people their careers. And doctors, how much did you spend getting your doctorate? I mean, that's a lot of money. So you take a great deal of risk on your personal. I mean, look at both doctors, they're both smiling, but it's a great deal of money. It's not just a little bit of money. It costs a great deal of money to get your doctorate. And so you're risking paying off that balance by somebody else's medicine that they're using. It ripples that far back.
Well, and I mean, I'm lucky because as a PhD researcher, so yeah, my research to get a PhD, my PhD took me 7 years. My master's degree took me 4 years. My undergraduate took me 4 years. So yes, I've been in school for a long time. As a researcher, though, with a PhD, no one can take that away from me. I don't have to go through a licensing board at this point. I don't have to do a yearly relicensing. So, I mean, the risk to me is if I'm still on a traditional academic stream and trying to get, you know, be good and listen to whatever, you know, not get out of line, not really call anyone out. If you're still trying to do that academic stream, then that's who you're worried about impressing or, you know, pissing off, because you might not get a job. Or a lot of professors, you know, it doesn't end. There's always something to keep you in line. Like even the full professors are scared to speak out because now they're thinking, now I've made it here, I have all my funders, I don't want to piss off my funders, I don't want to. So there's always something to keep you in line. But with medical doctors, they have an additional risk because now their risk is to lose their license where they can't actually practice their craft anymore. So yeah, they have to be very careful. So as a researcher, PhD, I feel like I have to say something. Like I can put myself out there more, so I'm going to, because like you all said, once you see cannabis help some people and what it can do, you can't stay quiet anymore. It just feels unethical to me to stay quiet. Like I need to what I can speak to. And so hopefully by doing that, I can give other people the words or the confidence, or just, you know, to start saying something, because that's how it happens, is by us all even, you know, showing up here. And thank you to Marcus for hosting this space for us, because we're the people who can help bring other people into this and help bring everyone, like not just researchers and medical doctors, but patients, so they feel more confident in talking about their personal experiences.
Well, you can bring that knowledge and expertise, and in a way that we laymen can't. We discuss all this information, but they still say, oh, where's the doctors and where the research? So thank you both doctors for being brave and being out there and taking those risks and actually speaking forward, because you're also being peer reviewed amongst your own people, but at the same time you're really helping all of us push the cannabis forward, because without your type of expertise we would still be considered those stoners who are just trying to get high, which has always been a frustration, because we do get high, but at the same time we know there's medicinal benefit from this, anecdotally from our own experience and our own survival. And we know that you will help push it to realms that we have only hoped to see. You're cresting the horizon and starting to see the questions that we never knew would exist.
No, it's wonderful. I think
all
what
of
you're
us.
doing, Natasha, is very right. You know, this is why I've had such reverence for guys like Dr. Todd McArea and Mary Lynn Mathers, the woman that started Patients Out of Time, is an actual nurse. And she was a normal board member before she started Patients Out of Time. And the very name of the organization really is the mission statement, because a lot of the people they were working with didn't have time to wait for policy to change and had to make moral decisions based on, were they going to be, you know, legally dead or illegally alive. And a lot of us just said fuck it and broke the law. And Mary Lynn Mathers and Al Brine were pioneers in bringing this information to professionals so that professionals would understand the how much information was already available to them that wasn't being taught to them in the universities, in the classes that they were taking, becoming doctors. And they could all the way go through getting their MD and not ever have heard anything about cannabinoids or cannabinoid medicine. And it almost been verboten to speak about if you did bring it up. And it's been doctors like you who are breaking the rules. And you would be probably very inspired by Dr. Todd McArea's actual story, because he was like one of the first government whistleblowers, because he was working for what became the National Institute of Health. And when he first discovered cannabinoid information, it was in the short amount of time in the 60s when it was actually classified, because it was coming out of Israel and they had just discovered THC in 63. So the US government expected the doctors to keep their mouth shut about these discoveries being made in Israel, and he couldn't handle it. And he actually quit his job and put together that compendium, the 1859 to 1972, the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission report. And he felt it was his moral duty to bring this message to the people.
You know, it's fortuitous, Todd, is that you and I met at Mary Lynn Mathery and Al Burns' house in Virginia.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Nice.
In 1994, for those of you watching, if you really want to date us.
Well, there it is. A year later, I think I met you in Amsterdam at the Positronics.
At Posi. I remember meeting you right away. You looked very different, my friend. But
Yeah.
you had the same smile. Yeah. Posi was like a dream, wasn't it?
You had a lot more hair.
I'm telling you. They did this article on me recently in Lyft, and they used a picture from like 10 years ago where I'm hanging on the zip line. People
Yeah, you're the most interesting man in the cannabis world. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Great article.
I like the article. Maybe the title was a little bit over exaggerated.
Come on, you are interesting.
Yeah, sure, I'm interesting, but not the most interesting. There's some interesting people in this industry. Holy shit. I find some of the most interesting to be the patient stories myself.
They hit you right square in the heart and in the gut. I mean, there's no way you can deny it. You know, once you actually meet these people and you see their afflictions and how they're actually immediately affected by the use of this medication, as you know, I've stated before, it's what strengthens every single one of our resolves, why we have all dedicated our lives to it, because we've seen firsthand what it can do. And once you've seen that, it's kind of hard to roll it back and rewind.
If it wasn't for this plant, I wouldn't be here. I'd be hooked on pharmaceutical drugs and drooling.
This is true. This is true. You were on drugs and drooling, John. I'm definitely like, your before and after is definitely a powerful cannabis patient story.
You know, I just saw the surgeon last week, and I've finally been okayed for full back to physiotherapy and started going into the gym and lifting weights and stuff. He said my healing was fantastic. He was happy I was held on a leash. He said, don't stop using what I'm using, like to everything, like Natasha, what you gave me here, to the creams and all of the cannabis products I've used over the years is what's gone to where I am today, and the plant that wake me up every day to feed. So you know what, I give it all to the plant and to the people. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those particular things in my life. It's really it's come a long way, and the doctor said keep doing what you're doing, but he says a little bit slower. So things are good. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear. Always happy that your health is with you, especially after, well, you know, your health is one thing when you're just taking it for granted, but when it gets taken away from you, then you got to fight back to get it. Then it's different. Then you appreciate that shit on a different level.
It sounds weird, but I'm really glad I went through it as a child. I mean, it was horrible. It was a nightmare, but I'm so glad I have passion, and it's just such a beautiful thing to be post that.
Totally agree with you, Todd. The passion.
Yeah, I didn't want to go through it either, but I'm thankful I did, because of the perspective it gave me, as well as it gives you a humbleness. Once you go from healthy to not healthy, you want healthy so bad. It every ounce of your strength. Look at, Todd can attest to it much more than me. We all go through it, but it's our own rebirth, and it's a beautiful, frustrating, and ugly thing. But when you can find your relief and find your voice and stand on your own 2 feet, man, I'm thankful to you all.
Sure. Absolutely, man. I'm just like, go ahead, Todd.
When I was going to say, it's really weird because like a lot of times when I first started being a pot activist and trying to communicate with other people that had cancer, it was really a tough message to tell people that, look, you know, something's going to kill you in life anyway, but if this doesn't kill you, you're going to be so glad you went through it. And that's a really hard thing to say to somebody who feels like they're dying, but really is about to be reborn. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but cancer doesn't kill that many people. And you know, life is going to kill you one way or another. So we should just be realistic. But cancer is actually very treatable, and a lot of people live through it, and it feels horrible when you're going through it. But once you get through it, it's really amazing to feel so connected to life and to, you know, treasure each second, each breath. And I think it's beautiful. And if you look at life like it's just teaching you lessons, you can really learn a lot along the way.
Well, I'm glad you continued on from that conversation, because when you just first said cancer doesn't kill that many people, it reminded me of Sean Spicer saying that nobody used chemical warfare gas during the war.
In respect of, you know, if I was born in 1870, I would have been dead by 1872 because, you know, no one would have known how to treat me. You know,
Sure.
Luckily 100 years later, I'm sitting here having a conversation with you, you know, at age 46. And that is because of Western medicine and the understanding of science and doctors and their practicing of medicine. But, you know, that failed me, and we're having a conversation about holistic medicine and cannabis. So who would have thought, you know, it's all full circle. But
For sure.
again, I'm glad I wasn't born in 1870, or I wouldn't have seen, you know, age 6.
Sean 8033. Who's that old lady making dry sift?
I laughed out loud hard on that one.
Little lady, eh? Let's do a bong rip to that then.
Absolutely.
Is that the bearded lady from the circus?
It does from a distance, with the wooden shelf and the sort of like the background of the room, look like some old Suomi Laval photos of like, you know, they're busting out the hash. It's like, oh yeah, getting it done. Hashish, that's another old book. Great one. I'm sure Todd's got that one on his shelf. My shelf's far away. I don't have shit on my shelf. I did find this funny enough from 2008 recently. I found this in the bottom of my drawer. So it was like a cannabis cup that I won for best product.
I have one of those too. I have that exact same little thing.
Yeah, this is like a second or a third prize. I think it was second for best product, which was amazing in 2008 for me to get that, because you had to know the history of myself and Mila to really understand why that was incredible. But
yeah, that's so old. It was hanging on my volcano.
Right. I found mine in the bottom of a drawer that I cleaned out the other day.
It is hanging on my volcano, to be honest, wherever that is.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Todd, I did see it actually hanging on your volcano the other day.
Bong rip.
I don't think I've seen those things in years. I know they're somewhere in this house, but I haven't seen our volcano in a long time. How many of you still use a volcano on the panel?
I don't.
I just found mine. It was on the bottom shelf down here.
I
I haven't seen it in a while.
I have
move them. Every time I go to CCHQ, there's one on every table, and I move it off the table. I just get it right off the table and I put it under the table, and then I set up my rig. That being said, I've always had an appreciation for Stores and Bickle. I think they did it right. They came they came from a very unique perspective. I first met Marcus and his daughter in, oh, nice. Sam's got Hashish by Suomi Laval.
I've got that book.
Here. Yeah, me as well. Absolutely. It's a great one. It's really like got beautiful images that makes you, any hashish lover is transported to the time. You can almost feel what it felt like to be in those places, and definitely like, holy shit, like you definitely want to be wearing a mask in that fucking hash producing room.
Well, that book's historical, because I don't know of any book of that kind at that time that was one large format like that is in the photography, as well as I've only read about these techniques, and to actually visually finally for the first time, I saw mine at Ed Rosenthal, and from there I went and I hunted and I found it on eBay. But yeah, it's about the only place. EBay and Amazon, they're very rare to come by, and they're not cheap.
It even has an extraction chapter. You know, where does it go, Sam? It goes to Lebanon and it goes to like Kathmandu.
I think the primary focus is Lebanon, but I tell you,
they make 00 as well.
I don't think I've read it in 20 years.
But doesn't it finish with Sadhu photos in like Nepal?
I think you're mixing up with Lawrence Cherniak, but maybe
no. There's pictures in there as well, Sam. Yeah, there's pictures of the at the end. There is you can see the
way up in the mountains.
You get the Sadhu butt. You see them from.
Yeah, they're standing around in their little loincloths or whatnot, but they're like up in the mountains, dude. Like if you
way up there for
way up.
very little clothing.
Like yeah, you'd be fucking cold up. Oh, here we go. Todd's got it.
Yeah, no, I see pictures of Nepal.
Nepal, okay.
This really is the first picture book of hashish. I mean, when you look at it, okay, and it's this.
Damn, are you in a greenhouse, bro?
That looks like a forever flowering greenhouse.
That's super sweet, dude. Coming into Hash Church in a greenhouse, priceless.
I had nowhere else to go.
Hey, welcome, Eric. Hey, for everybody watching, Eric is part of Forever Flowering Greenhouses, and light deprivation has been taking over the way we grow in greenhouses all over California.
Yeah.
Sweet. So thank you for joining us. I love that you have it closed right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I get good Wi-Fi out here, and it's kind of like my office away from the office.
I love it. We were talking about powdery mildew a few weeks back, and I wanted to get you on, remember, and because you and I were in that very greenhouse having a pretty cool conversation, and you had a lot of insight, and I just was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and then we could talk a little bit about powdery mildew management, because
yeah, I mean, it's huge right now. Everybody's pumping out PM. I mean, there's more PM factories than there are clean cannabis factories right now, I think you could say. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed in the, you know, I've been doing this with Forever Flowering for 10 years. The business has been around for 11. And in that time, we didn't know everything at the beginning. You know, we didn't really understand the realities of greenhouses being used in the summertime. And a lot of people get PM and just kind of go, well, that's part of the deal. And, you know, we know that's not true, but this day and age with legalization happening the way it's going is that everybody wants to get in here and start growing, and everybody's always, you know, too late or needed to be ready yesterday or whatever it is. And with this, you know, everybody in such a hurry, and it's so important to get everything going. The last thing I feel like that is looked at or taken care of is the actual farming part. You know, everybody knows how to build fences and put up greenhouses and pencil in all these boxes and do all this stuff. But when it gets down to planting the plant and making sure that it's clean and you get those flowers in the jar and they can make it to the shelf or make it to the extractor without passing or without, you know, failing a test is really the challenge these days.
Well, they can build a box, but they just don't know how to properly ventilate it or aerate it and all those realities that are your expertise.
Well, and one of the things that I've run into is that, you know, and this isn't sliding indoor growing or anything like that. I just use it as a way to look at one thing and look at the other, basically, is that, you know, indoor growing through prohibition, you know, was really important. And so there was a lot of books written on how to grow cannabis indoors. And, you know, a lot, or if not all of those books are very important for growing cannabis indoors. But when we go into the greenhouse, a lot of people are trying to bring those same parameters with them into the greenhouse. And depending on where you are, it can be tough to, you know, environmentally control a greenhouse like a lot of people imagine and keep those same parameters. And let's say the parameters might be at 75 degrees air temp and 35 or something percent humidity is an indoor parameter people would like to shoot for, especially a beginner. And when you get out into the greenhouse and you have somebody that says, you know, I'm in the Emerald Triangle, or, you know, even upstate New York for that matter, and they go, I need to keep it 75 degrees in here with 35% humidity, it can get really tough, and it can take the green right out of the greenhouse.
Can you just break down what is light depth for a lot of people that don't maybe understand what that is?
Well, you know, light dep is this, I guess you could say, as a slang term for a photo period. And so light deprivation is more of a term that I think, you know, it would be safe to say that, you know, cannabis growers were using for the most part. But when you Google it and look back at light deprivation, a lot of times what you'll run into is the forestry industry was really using it in the mid 90s to cause pine trees and things to go into dormancy. And so it was really heavily used in that industry to create seed, I believe, for the forestry industry. So a lot of the Google research that I've done for light deprivation, you know, has always been in the forestry industry. Now, granted, the poinsettias do it to create those poinsettias to turn red. They pull a shade curtain. And so really what we're doing is trying to trick the plants and become Mother Nature. So indoors really easy to do that by taking a timer and setting the lights to whenever you want them to come on and off. And so if you have a 12 on, 12 off schedule, then a lot of people are doing them on a 7 to 7, let's say. And so then when you get out here in the outdoor sun or into the greenhouse, you know, because we're using sun grown, the lights behind me are for assisting when there's not enough sun. But if we're just relying on the sun, let's say this summer, when you plant a seed, it takes all summer long. By the time the days start to shorten, we start to have plants flowering because we don't have a timer to hit a switch and turn the sun off when we want to. So what we have are the curtains you see behind me. We can actually choke the sun out by closing the curtains. And so our timer isn't for the lights. Our timer now is for this curtain that opens and closes. And yeah, we can pick the 7 to 7 schedule, 6 to 6 or whatever. The greenhouse can open up in the middle of the night to breathe. We have back there in the back, you see those black light traps over the fans. Those allow you to exchange the air when the blackout is closed. And so, you know, we're really light years ahead of where light dep was even when I started with the company, or even in 1992 when I was first introduced to it when I moved up to Humboldt. And people were black boxing. They actually took a cardboard box from like Sears or something where you got a washer and dryer or even a refrigerator, and they would black box the entire plant. So each plant had its own black box for doing light dep. And now that I go around up to some of the events in Humboldt, I try to talk to some of the old timers that moved up there in the 70s and do a little research. And most of them in the 70s and 80s were doing light dep techniques or black boxing to sex the plants before they brought them out into the field. And so people have been doing this technique with the sun and black boxing or light depping for a long time, which ultimately is creating a photo period.
Awesome.
In the Netherlands, they've used it since the 70s for chrysanthemums and crops like that.
Yeah, I remember there is the chrysanthemums, I think mums, I know poinsettias. There's a few crops that do something different with the shading technique.
The first time I tried it was 85, and that's with automated greenhouses, with automated darkening systems run by a computer.
Yeah, see, I haven't gotten to you yet. I'm dying to sit and smoke or talk to you for a while, because most of the work that I do now is going around and interviewing other people to get a lot of the information and science, I guess, behind this light dep greenhouse thing. And you definitely have some great information or stories. I guarantee it.
Oh, I'm sure he has a few.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at the greenhouse that you're in, and I want one behind my house.
yeah. I mean, it's the ultimate backyard. I mean,
And
it makes your.
Are the side walls, are they solid plastic or woven?
We can do both. I mean, typically we use a woven material.
Can you pop it and make it open while you're talking?
Yeah, I'm starting to do that right now. I was just closing the door because it was blasting me in the face.
You know, Mark, it's funny but close the door and let it go black, and then let it. Oh, it's opening anyway. It's so awesome.
dude. Look at that.
What is
Yeah,
the black curtain material made out of? Is it a reflective material or is it just a plain?
No, I prefer
black
black on the inside. A lot of companies or greenhouse companies are using a reflective material on the inside and maybe white on the inside. And there's lots of formulas for blackout material we can use, but I prefer to use black on the inside because it deadens any light leaks that could occur. White will reflect and bounce around a light leak or a pinhole a lot more than black. And so when we have a light depth greenhouse, whether people are doing it manually or even automated, we still can run into operator error. We can run into malfunctions and things like that. And so black is always going to help you if there should be something that goes wrong. And a lot of people also go, well, I use lights and lights are really reflective. But if you look at the lights I had going a minute ago, they aim down. They don't aim up and then everything bounces back. And so realistically, having black on the inside has always been the best policy for my side of it.
And how long is the greenhouse that you're in?
This one that I'm in is 60 feet long, so it's 1,440 square feet. It's a 24 by 60, very popular model. Typically, we see 75 to 110 pounds come out of a greenhouse this size, up to 5 times a year.
I think that's my jam.
Can you disclose what it would cost for a layman to acquire something like that?
Definitely. I mean, if you want to talk about this as the deluxe model with everything, including touchscreen controller, breathable blackout cloths, the light traps over the exhaust system, mechanical ventilation, automated roll-up sidewalls, automated roof vent, the circulation fans, we're right around $45,000, and that's roughly $29 a square foot and some change.
Wow, that's good.
But it doesn't have to be that much. People could say, hey, I don't, maybe I don't want automated sidewalls because I'm going to use hand cranks and roll them up myself.
Bite your tongue.
That's a great price.
Well, I'm just saying, there's levels to it, and I know people got to work up to it. I have people that go, I can buy the greenhouse this year, and next season I'm buying the depth kit.
Right. That's cool.
I do downplay or downsell a lot of people's stuff because I want them to be successful. And one of the things I ran into as a contractor getting into this, I didn't always work for Forever Flowering as the manager. I actually did excavating contractor by trade, so I do site development for the greenhouses. And what I noticed is people would spend a ton of money on property, wells, houses, infrastructure, and all these things. And when they got the keys to the greenhouse, or it was like ready to plant type of thing, they couldn't afford dirt. They couldn't afford maybe the fence to protect the plants themselves. And so like all these great things were happening, and then they're left with a wheelbarrow and pennies in their pocket to do shit with. And so my whole thing is I want people to get what they can get so that they can make something happen, but not blow it all and not be able to actually go buy the dirt or buy the stuff to actually grow the plants themselves, because too many people are getting the cart before the horse. And I know it's an exciting time, but when you look at developing a property nowadays, there's just a lot to do. And so, maybe this is the goal, but we should look at it as, buying the greenhouse, doing a round, getting ready for, there's stages and levels to do it. I always tell people too, why buy the lights in the middle of the summer if you're not going to use them and we're just using this blackout curtain? Why buy a heating system if you're going to, run it in the summertime and you're not going to use any heat? I know a lot of people come to me and go, I need a greenhouse, I need heat, I need lights. And so I always kind of go, well, by the time you get this thing paid for, installed, up and running, are you going to need this, that, or the other? Or could we have saved that money until later on in the season when you actually need to buy that stuff and install it? And so, part of me, I guess, is by default from seeing all the disasters out there that I just can't help myself but try to, downsell people.
Or darkening mildew, because that is one of the disasters, the PM that you're seeing people grow.
The PM is a big issue because, like I was saying at the beginning, people try to assume that this is like an indoor grow room and they want to achieve the parameters like an indoor grow. And so you can really beat yourself up by trying to do that. Not everybody has a greenhouse in areas that all the things that a greenhouse has to offer actually work. One of those things are a wet wall or an evaporative cooling system. The biggest thing that people want to do in a summer greenhouse out in the hot sun, and it's not that it's wrong, don't get me wrong, is to turn on some cooling. And so when a greenhouse gets hot, the first thought is turn on fans, turn on some cooling, get a dehumidifier, do all this stuff kind of like I would do in an indoor room, maybe even put up shade cloth to try to restrict more light because we're out here in the sun just getting beat up. And so the one biggest mistake people are doing is they're not realizing there's a difference between greenhouses used in the winter and the summer. And so that's why I like to try to phrase or coin the term winter mode and summer mode. And actually, if I was to go down, and I probably could here in a minute and take you down to the other greenhouse we have, it's really shows what I'm talking about in summer mode. And so when I talk about winter mode greenhouses, if you think about it, greenhouses were invented for wintertime. Nobody back in time, anywhere that I can find, was sitting in the hot sun going, I need a greenhouse. You know, it was really because we're trying to extend the seasons and grow something using the sun, but then it gets cold at night, so you got to have heat. But we're really trying to fight Mother Nature in the wintertime versus going out in the summertime and using this apparatus because it was needed. It was cannabis growers that needed them, one, because the fall rains were coming in and ruining the harvest. You know, it just happened this year, a week before harvest, the rains come, and so everybody's like, we got to harvest. You know, it was like, it wasn't even harvest season this year, but when the rains came, it became harvest season, you know, even though it was around that time. So greenhouses were popular for that. And then it was like, oh, this light depth thing, we can do light depth, this hoop or this structure holds up a tarp, you know, like I might as well do that. And so what we see is a lot of people actually that won't use the greenhouse with a greenhouse skin. Like Washington, there's a lot of pictures of, you see hoops scattered everywhere, and all they use the hoops for is the depth cloth, and they don't use the greenhouse cover unless the rains come. And so what's happening is that, you know, the greenhouses were invented for wintertime. We're using them in the summer. So what are we doing wrong in the summertime? Well, we're trapping air and it's heating up. And if you trap air and it heats up, cannabis, what does cannabis do when it's sick, stressed out, or overheated? Anyone?
Succumbs to disease.
Well,
it transpires.
It transpires, exactly. What do I do when I get sick, hot, or stressed out? I start to sweat too, you know what I mean? The sweat rolls off my forehead. Cannabis transpires, but we don't see the sweat off of its forehead unless there's a greenhouse cover catching the condensation. And so outdoor plants, the only way we can see condensation is when the plants get droopy in the afternoon. They get really droopy because all that water's come up into the leaves and they're hanging down and the gravity's just holding all that water weight. And then as the sun intensity dissipates, they start to get, you know, perky like this again. And so that's transpiration for an outdoor plant. And we know that outdoor plants can handle high heat. They can handle pretty intense conditions because they're out there in the sun all the time. And so it's pretty easy to get a outdoor grower to swallow the pill that I'm giving out versus an indoor grower that wants the parameters. But nevertheless, the greenhouses typically are trapping air, they're heating up, and then we're trying to cool them down. And so what I've found the better way to do it is to treat it more like an outdoor grow, in the sense that we can actually open the greenhouse up on the sidewalls. It's hard to see. These sidewalls actually open up on the greenhouse. And then there's also a ridge vent on the roof of the greenhouse that's opened as well. And so what that does is it avoids the solar gain in the hot day. It takes away the greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse isn't able to trap air and heat up. And so that's the first step in helping to support the plant. Secondly is the greenhouse cover itself. When I first started back in the day, people used to call and go, well, I need glass, the more light. You know, it was an indoor thing too. The more light, we need more lights. We got to have all the light we can get. What we found with clear glass, and you can see this in a lot of cut flower farms in Santa Barbara, Oxnard, and all over the place that are even converting to cannabis right now, is that they use a ton of shade cloth all day long. So the glass house is here, the sun comes up, the shade cloth deploys, and then the sun goes away and the shade cloth opens again. And so a lot of times the glass houses are also whitewashed in the summertime too. So the problem seems to be is that the summer sun through the glass causes the plants to transpire more than they should. So in order to control that, they're shutting shade cloth down to relieve the plants so they don't transpire as much. And again, what is the transpiration doing to the greenhouse? Causing the humidity that everybody's so fearful of. And so what
You know
I
what, though? Can I say something, Eric? When
Yeah.
you consider how successful we are growing under lights indoors, it goes to show. And what is the percentage of light per meter we get from a light bulb compared to the sun? It's minuscule.
Right.
You know, sun. There's nothing as bright as the sun. And the reality is we do really well. So taking down the amount of light that they were giving the plants, starting with such a huge source, that only makes sense as to then why we wouldn't need all this additional cooling and shit, because we wouldn't give the plants the need. We wouldn't be stressing them out like we're doing with all that light in such a confined space. You know?
Exactly. It's just too much for them to handle all at one time, especially under the glass. The clear materials, they tend to magnify the light. So when you get a higher leaf surface temperature, of course, the plant is going to do what it was naturally designed to do. It's got a mechanism put in it just like we have. We sweat, the plants sweat. When it gets hot, it's got to do what it's got to do. And so then everybody wants to get rid of the condensation. So then we turn on dehumidifiers, we turn on fans, we do all this stuff to get rid of a result of what the plant is doing because of its situation. Unsupported, so to speak, as I like to call it. And so too much winter mode in the summer mode greenhouse. And so the best bet, in my opinion, and what I found here at the East Coast and all over the place, because most people that are growing cannabis also are trying to grow them in a hot, sunny place. You know, there is people with legalization now, because of legalization, that are growing, you know, wherever now. But historically speaking, people that were using the sun to grow cannabis were in hot, sunny spots all over the place. And so the diffused cover, what we have on the greenhouse, and this goes back to the first comment, if it's polyweave or polycarbonate, whether it's the rigid stuff or the plastic looking stuff that we have here, it's 100% diffused. So it doesn't transmit as much light as glass. It doesn't allow the sun to come through directly or magnify it. It actually, if you Google light diffusion in greenhouses, there's a lot of studies that have been done and published with vegetables mostly that talk about splitting the light particles in half. So even on a cloudy day, you get more light particles bouncing around here than you would right outside the door of the greenhouse. So when we split light particles in half, we're also scattering infrared, which brings the heat. And then UVB is actually the discoloring and degrading UV of all three of those. And so UVB in particular is blocked out through these covers. And so when you have those three things combined with avoiding the solar gain, cannabis loves it. I mean, it truly sits there all day long, even when it's 100 degrees. And here's my favorite tool in the greenhouse. Even indoor grow rooms, I use this. It's just an infrared thermometer. Everybody goes around with temp and humidity and how we feel, but we're out here in socks and shoes and clothes, and you know what I mean? Plants are basically naked, sitting with their feet in the kiddie pool, I like to call it, because their roots are down in the moist soil. So it's nothing like we're experiencing walking around in this greenhouse on a hot summer day. And so using the infrared thermometer, we can actually see how hot the plant is itself rather than how hot the air temperature is. I already know it's 100 degrees and I'm sweating like crazy, but I'm over here looking at this plant that's standing tall, looking good, and doesn't seem to need to be using water and overheating in the afternoon, just like the outdoor plants over there that are nice and droopy. And maybe even my buddy's greenhouse that's a swamp right now because the condensation's dripping back down. And 9 times out of 10, they're trapping too much air. They have too clear of a cover. The other thing people do in their hot summer greenhouses, they put black ground cover on the ground. Black will store solar radiation, and even when it cools down, can give off heat. And so the other thing that we have is black grow bags or black containers to grow in. Those also attract a ton of heat. And so what we have is an unsupportive greenhouse for cannabis. We're working harder, not smarter, and then we're probably defaulting to fans, cooling, dehumidifiers. And so in my version of a greenhouse, and I probably should start walking down there to do it, is that we're opening up the greenhouse, the diffused cover, and then what I do is I use the tan grow bags. They have tan grow bags out there. They even have white ones I just ran into, and I guess it's the original, the guy that invented the smart pots back in the day switched over to this new style that he made, and now they're white. And so obviously he knew something and went to the white, because leaving plants out in the hot sun with the black wasn't obviously doing the trick. And so
on that notion, doesn't it make
he's
sense?
onto it.
Doesn't it make sense to put a white skin on the outside of the black interior. So if you have white, does it do anything for
I painted my greenhouse white every year for the last 30 years. And I used a temporary one that as soon as the rain came, it washed it off.
Yeah, that whitewash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big service around that. Helicopters go around and spray acres of greenhouses with that whitewash. And if it happens to rain, you got to reapply it again.
No, it can stand a few rains.
A few, okay, yeah.
And it comes in all different kinds of opaqueness. You can get white that will last a year no matter how much it gets rained on.
Oh, no kidding.
Ones that are really lightweight and everything in between.
Yeah, see, there's not a lot of those options out here because there's not so much glass, and a lot of them have so much bird shit and dust on them now that I don't think they need the whitewash, because the cut flower farmers were running on 4% margins, and they're basically all going belly up because Colombia grows cut flowers for much cheaper and sends them here. And so a lot of them are converting to cannabis, and they're finding out the realities of what Todd was bringing up, is that when a plant is in a situation where it's trying to transpire and it's in a humid state already, a greenhouse that's already humid, because the sea of green, the plants are made of water, you know, of course, besides they're transpiring, it's not like the moisture has gone away or anything. And so this whole sea of green, and the plants are starting to warm up because too much sun is coming in. And a lot of the Dutch growers that are trying to grow cannabis down there, I think, closing the shade cloth too late, because the plants are already heating up and they're already transpiring. And so we have these, you know, these hot, humid boxes everywhere that are just pumping out tons of PM because the plants are...
When you pull up the sidewalls, does that expose the crop to pest?
No. The crops are only susceptible to pests, it seems to us, from what we've seen, when the plants are in abolic stress. So when we have people that are enclosing these swamp boxes, as I call it, with plants that are actually having yellow fan leaves because they're going through nutrient lockout, well, they're actually attracting more pests.
I appreciate your ideas on this, but I guarantee you the cannabis gets pest, even if it's beautiful and healthy.
So far, what we've run into is that they haven't had a problem. People are doing good IPMs and stuff, but I see more pest and disease in greenhouses that are run wrong than I do in the ones that are going right.
Well, I would think that would be a natural, though, because if you're running a greenhouse right, you have people that are obviously paying attention to detail, but, you know, disasters happen nonetheless. It's also everything is in life. How do you deal with them? That really matters. You know, almost anything can happen to somebody and they can overcome it if they deal with it well.
Right.
I guarantee you that if you use a strong IPM program, you can absolutely control cannabis pests without the slightest doubt. But I guarantee that if you don't control it, it doesn't matter how healthy your plants are, they will find you.
Eric, I have a question. What is the smallest greenhouse you guys make, and what's the largest you can make?
The smallest we make is a simple hoop house that's actually 16 feet wide and 12 feet long. I actually have it sitting in the back. Let's see, right there. It's a little hoop right up there. It's hard to see probably, but that's a little 16 by 12 right there on the landing. And so you could probably put six plants in there. But we don't really have a lot of hobby backyard style greenhouses. The 16 by 12 I created once Prop 64 passed, because the smallest greenhouse we really sold was a 16 by 24. And so I just decided to pop up 3 ribs because we were using it as a booth for, you know, little cups and events and things. And so I thought, wow, this would be a good little backyard one. So, you know, it works okay, but people are in neighborhoods and there's smell and there's security issues and things like that. And so I know when I teach at Oaksterdam, the greenhouse class, we put up one of those little secure grow deals that are popular in Oakland and have the chain link fence that attaches to it and stuff like that. And the biggest we make, I mean, you can make, as you guys might know, in some of these, you know, I mean, the gutter connected structures can go on for days. It just, It depends on how much property you have. And then there these single style greenhouses like I'm in right here, these Gothics, the biggest we make of this one is a 30 by 144. So depending on what model of greenhouse, you know, what budget, we try to work with people and try to figure it out. A lot of people are getting permits these days too. And so there's tons of red tape and holdups, and people are like, I got to get growing, but I don't have my permit. And I don't mean a permit to grow. I mean the building permit. Maybe they don't have the electrical or whatever it is. There's a lot of people getting permits for everything nowadays, and so much held up that nobody's able to grow. The weather has held everybody up. I have greenhouses up on the hill sitting there because everybody's roads were washed out or whatever it is. And so it's going to be an interesting season because it's been a rough start. And so a lot of the people that have problems or red tape because of permitting are getting those little basic hoops and just pulling a tarp manually, kind of like the old days, while they're waiting for the master plan to be developed.
So here's a question. You say you got a 30-foot wide and a 24-foot wide. What's the on those particular greenhouses that you're in, what's the smallest width? Do you do them like 20?
This one's a 24. Yeah, no, 24 in this model. So the smallest automated in this model is a 24 by 24. And then we do have another model that's an A-frame greenhouse, and we can do an 18 by 24, which is an automated greenhouse. And so those are the small ones. Other than that, if you get one of those 16-foot wide hoops and you're fairly strong, somebody can pull a tarp over it manually, no problem. But yeah, automated greenhouses are kind of tough. I mean, we've come across a lot of the stuff that's already out there nowadays with the awning motors and the exterior depths and a lot of things, but we just have always tried to stick with stuff that's, you know, that really works and is going to last. And, you know, it's not really high end, it's just high quality.
Right.
Do you use Selfie motors?
We actually used to. It's funny. The first company that was really willing to work with us, because I didn't start the company. Jonathan Waldman started the company, and the first company that was willing to work with him to create a light deb greenhouse was Cravo, and they're from Ontario, Canada. And so they didn't really necessarily want their name on anything. They're really busy with their own projects, and so they're originally a shade company, and so they use all Somfy motors in their roll-up sides and then Ritter motors on the roof. And so nowadays we don't use any Somfy motors unless we're working with a Cravo house. It's all Ritter gear motors.
Yeah, well, we used to use those small Somfys because we could build little tiny units, you know, just big enough for like 100 plants within a bigger greenhouse that also had motors, but they weren't using the Somfy motors. They were using professional greenhouse drives.
Sam was doing greenhouse inception.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, that's the funny thing. Yeah, it would be good to chat. There's all kinds of different things that could be talked about, or I have questions about from the history of greenhouses and cannabis and stuff, because most of our stuff is out here on the West Coast where it's really hot and sunny, and so it's really easy to...
We used to use one that was #1 woven. We checked all the different brands of darkening curtains, and most of them were woven, but not breathable. You couldn't breathe through them.
Right, yeah. And this breathable stuff, you could barely, I mean, it would suffocate you if you wrapped it around your head. You could barely breathe.
We could breathe easily. And it was 2-layer. It was black on the inside, like you're talking about, and reflective Mylar on the outside to get rid of heat.
Yeah, and you know what? When I use my little heat gun right here and I shoot the Mylar versus the white's actually cooler by surface temp. So that's why I skip the Mylar.
Are you shooting the outside or because the Mylar is okay, first there's a layer of black, which is what's facing the plants, and the Mylar is above that. So
yeah. We used to do that formula back in the day until I started playing with this more.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean that the heat is not going into the greenhouse?
Well, in this hot summer day, I don't want heat coming into the greenhouse.
That's what I'm saying. The Mylar is reflecting.
Why it was cooler. White's cooler. It reflects. If it's cooler, then white's doing better than the Mylar.
Yeah, that's just the point of putting a reflective surface over your black skin, which is facing the plants.
Correct.
You're going to remove a lot of that by radiant heat because it's never going to get into the greenhouse. I think that's what Sam's trying to say.
Correct.
Well, see, yeah, a lot of the technology people talk about is using the greenhouses primarily in the wintertime. And so for us in our 10 years, everybody went to Costa Rica in the winter. And so everything that we focus on and deal with is all based on summertime growing and heat. And so that's why I say that this thing, when I shoot grow bags, ground cover, gravel, blackout covers, all that stuff, this thing tells me more than my thermostat in the greenhouse, because then I can actually shoot.
They don't build greenhouses for commercial purposes smaller than 200,000 square feet, and they don't use them. They all use them 24/7. There's
Correct,
no downtime ever.
Yeah, and that's the difference between cannabis growers on the West Coast historically and other places, is that they only use the greenhouses to hide the cannabis, protect it from the fall, and then light dep was the new, oh, let's do light dep. And so with all those three things coming into play, we're still having people out in the hot sun. And even in big greenhouses, I went to a 68,000 square footer in Carpinteria recently, and it was cooking in there, and they were plumping out tons of PM and mold. And the Dutch guy was like, I know how to control humidity. And I was like, you do? So, I mean, people are using them all the time, but it doesn't mean that they're using them smarter. And I see a lot of people working harder, and it has to do with just simple, using the right colors and things in the summer and versus using all these other things in the winter, because they don't all translate in the summertime to trap air and try to cool things that you're on the coast. And so it already is humid there. So wet walls don't even work. And in the case of a plant that sweats, we can keep the plant dry and cool just by moving the air and keeping it fresh. Like if I overheat, I stand in front of one of these fans right here, and it doesn't have a cooling system on it, but that air blowing across my forehead cools me down and starts to dry the sweat. And the cannabis seems to react the same way.
I can honestly say, if I didn't spray the outside of my greenhouse white every year, that the plants would be cooked, and all the tips would get burnt and die. I mean,
yeah. Did you have a shade cloth relied on the whitewash?
What's that?
Did you have a shade system in there too, or just relied on the whitewash?
No, I had a shade system and a darkening system, but I didn't need the shade system when I used white stuff.
Huh.
No,
How come you didn't?
It really
just use the shade system?
What's that?
How come you didn't just use the shade system instead of the whitewash?
Because I found the whitewash easier and simpler, and it's much more dependable than shade cloth. A shade cloth motor can jam, it can break, it can whatever.
Right.
Just like darkening motors. There is no such thing as 100% dependable darkening system.
No, I agree.
Yeah. A problem that hasn't happened yet.
No, all these things are mechanical, and there's operators, and there's tons of errors that can happen. I agree.
Yeah, I've used them for 30 years. I understand.
Yeah. It's a delicate situation, because the people that also want these greenhouses or get into these greenhouses just want to grow. And there is a little bit of level of being kind of like a little bit of a mechanic, or, you got to know what to look for. And if things need to be adjusted or lubricated or readjusted, controllers, sometimes their limit switches and the motors need to be set.
Because I had grown in greenhouses for more than a decade before I moved to the Netherlands, and then I grew for another 30 years here. So
where did you grow before you moved to the Netherlands?
Santa Cruz, California.
Santa Cruz, yeah, it's a great spot. It's pretty forgiving in the wintertime too.
Well, it depends where you are, because there's up in the hills and there's close to the ocean. But the end effect of it is, even with high humidity levels, I never had problems with mold or anything else. And I never had pest or disease problems, because I grew healthy plants, and I'm very, very integrated pest management. So I have as much experience as anybody in the field with cannabis and pest control.
Yeah, you probably have the most, maybe. I mean, yeah, you definitely have a lot. And what we're seeing nowadays is that people have been using Eagle 20 so much, and not everybody knew that Eagle 20 was bad. a lot of people imagined that it was just this other product to use. And I had somebody on Instagram, because I call a lot of people out on Instagram, not in a rude way, but anytime I see a variegated leaf that's half yellow and half green, I ask people if they've been using any Eagle 20, because a lot of times it's in an OG cut or some OG related material, and 9 times out of 10 they say, yeah, I used to use it, or yeah, I thought it was okay.
Well,
And
I've never used any pesticide of any kind except for as a tiny dip on little tiny clones that before I would transport them into my greenhouse.
Yeah, no, nowadays it's part of the deal is to break out whatever these things are and hope that and people just don't want to know that they're banned. I mean, and a lot of it has to do with just the fact that, you know, most people haven't been through or heard even your story that you whitewashed it every summer, like the stuff that you're talking about.
No,
that you had
every
to do
spring.
Every spring, but when it got hot, when the sun was more intense, when solar gain was easier achieved.
It never got more than 5-10 degrees hotter than outside.
Right. And see, I'm trying to just avoid solar gain altogether, because if we avoid solar gain in the greenhouse and then I shoot the plants with the leaf surface of this thing, the leaf surface of the plant is always cooler than the air temperature. And what I found is if I can keep the plants cooler than the outside air temperature or inside air temperature, because again, when the roof vents open and the sides are open, the temperature is the same inside as outside. And so when I shoot the leaf surface, it's cooler. And so when I go shoot the
my greenhouse, whenever there was sun out, it was always at least 5 or 10 degrees hotter, no matter what.
Yeah, that's the greenhouse effect. It's trapping air and it's doing what it's supposed to do. But like I said, out here in the summertime, most people can't even, when it's 100 degrees, they don't want it to be 105.
Can I ask a question? Is the floor there a slab of concrete?
No, slabs aren't a structural component of the greenhouse. They're handy and helpful, but and they can be a little bit costly again when people are developing their greenhouses.
Right. So is the floor just the earth, just the ground?
I prefer to put 4 to 6 inches of crushed gravel. It compacts almost like concrete, and water drains through it.
Can you talk? Yeah, I was just going to ask you to talk about the floor and how that impacts the environment of the room, because it would just appear that you're sort of making the connection with Mother Nature's biome, which is where the plant evolved, right? The plant evolved under the sun in Mother Nature's biome, which is the ground. So our roots in the ground.
I always have organic biodynamic.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on church before. So are these greenhouse systems basically designed for sort of roots in the ground cultivation?
Well, all the growers that come to us, everybody's trying to raise the bar, set the bar, or be the guy or whatever. And so it's amazing all the different stuff going on. It's hard to find, the one common thread, I guess you could say, that everybody's doing is growing in containers these days. Because with container growing in a greenhouse, especially doing light depth, considering that you want to try to do 5 harvests a year, you're doing the veg somewhere else and bringing plants in ready to flower into this greenhouse. And so on a container is the easiest method to do that. There are people that want to dig holes in these greenhouses and grow right into the earth, but
I also grow all my plants 10, 15 feet tall. I don't like short dogs.
Yeah, well, that also was part of plant count back in the day. And now that everybody's legalization is with square footage licenses, everybody wants to grow small, thousands and thousands of little plants, because just like me and you, when we get older, we start to fall apart and disease can set in or whatever. The same happens the bigger and the older a cannabis plant seems to get, the more it wants to fall apart with most people. And so having them small, young, quick. You look at the spring mix people that grow salad and they grow spring mix, they make a killing. They don't have to.
Right. So what you're saying is they got to grow them quick before they fuck them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
No, it's a really good point. The longer a plant's in the production system, the more opportunity for problems.
No,
correct.
That is absolutely true.
Right.
But I guess the real question is, you know, are we helping people or what?
You know what, though? Wait a minute, though, because, you know, I got in trouble for 4,000 plants in one house in 1997 because I was basically growing Sea of Green, because at Posse we were learning, and it was from that guy, Rob Clark, that a lot of little plants growing in a less period of time is less likely to get susceptible to all of these problems. So all we did is take our little clones, minimize our veg time, and then figure out how big they had to be to get to the amount of grams we wanted to get, which, remember, at Posse, we were teaching people to put 100 little baby plants under 1,000 watts or 1,200 watts of light, 600s.
How many square meters was that, Todd?
2 square meters, 100 little plants, 2 square meters, 100 little plants, 10 grams a plant, you got a kilo. And that they called it D-Kilo Champion, and both 600s went into one ballast box that had a built-in timer.
We did really high counts too, and you do get more cannabis, but the manicures hate you.
But all we were doing is this. We were trying to do what Mother Nature would do, which was turn it into a bush over the course of 1 or 2 months. We were acting as the little bush maker, and we were just putting it flat and then popping it at the point we needed to pop it in order to get 10 grams or half ounce, or, you know, depending on how many plants you wanted to space per meter would determine how many grams you could get per plant. But their little method of 100 little plants in 2 square meters always got you about a kilo, because anyone who grows pot knows it's easy to get 10 grams off one plant.
So that's 50 plants a square meter?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
with almost zero pre-grow.
Yeah, I tried 70 and 100 one time, and I did get more cannabis, but man, was it, you know, squaggly.
No, it's just little popsicle stick buds. And you know what? I mean, I watched my friend Tom take NL5 by Hayes, seeds he got from Neville, with 0 days pre-grow, and pop 88 plants under 2 600-watt lights, and pulled down about 16 grams per plant. He got over 1,400 grams from 2 600-watt lights with 0 days pre-grow, and it was from NL5 by Hayes. He only averaged 16 grams a plant, but yeah, you take 16 and you multiply it by 88, suddenly he's got a pretty damn good harvest, considering he only had 2 lights up. Well, he had 4, but there was 2 on the other side.
Give me a big giant plant with no leaf.
I'll just take all the resin off of said plant, and you can have everything.
There you go. I agree.
Well, and going back to the floor of the greenhouse, or people using, or what they're doing, one of the main things is overwatering. You know, regardless of what floor we have in the greenhouse, people tend to overwater because there's also this sensation or this need to feed the plants to make them grow faster and grow bigger and all these things. And so a lot of people are in this, it's kind of like a hydro thing where they grow in grow bags with cocoa, and they're constantly feeding and watering. So they're watering twice a day, you know, feeding every single day. And I walk into these greenhouses and it's really just wet everywhere. And so they're getting by in the summertime, but then I get the phone call in September, October, and you know, when the weather changes and the mold and the PM instantly just boom overnight, it's just they're cutting down entire rows rather than harvesting. They're culling the plants and stuff. And so the overwatering combined with running the greenhouse, as like I say, too much winter mode in the summer, I mean, it's just recipes for disaster. And it's not for a lack of people trying really hard and spending a lot of money. There's just a big disconnect because I don't think everybody got into this to be a green thumb. They weren't already gardeners out gardening and growing things. They were like, cannabis, we got to jump on the wave. Now I'm a gardener, you know? And it's like, well, fuck. Okay, are you? Or, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of people, you know, and this isn't a bad thing. I'm happy that everybody's gardening and growing. All I'm trying to say is that if you weren't a green thumb before, don't be surprised if you're not now. And there's some things to learn. And it's tough to figure out who the right person to listen to probably is as well. I mean, I was just at that little fair last week, and I was telling Todd about the other day, and they got some lively speakers out there these days.
I told people that ask me all the time in regards to how to do this and how to do that and where's the best source of information. I always say, you know, the best source of information is in the mistakes that you're too afraid to make. So if you could just go out and make your own mistakes, I swear to you, there is wherein lies the magic that you will find along your journey. Go make your mistakes. Don't be so.
Unfortunately, those mistakes aren't in the like little closet or a couple light rooms like a lot of us used to deal with. We're like, oh, we fucked up. Let's, you know, pull the.
That's what they need to do. They need to go to a smaller level and go make some mistakes.
You are absolutely right. Yeah. And I try to tell people when they come to buy the big greenhouse, in order to design a heating system, let's say, or a couple things, I can ask a couple questions and know right away if they're getting into something they should be getting into. And what I end up trying to do even is downsell a greenhouse where people, hey, you should go pull tarps for 2 months. Like get a little hoop, get a ladder, pull some tarps before you get this automated, you know, with all these things, because you can come in here and touch and push all the buttons and set all the things you want. But if you haven't got out there and pulled some tarps and seen what the plants really do and be with them and, you know, really be the master for the time being. And it's only 2 months, you know, a couple $1,000 for 2 months and you learn all kinds of shit, just like if you got a small room. But everybody wants to scale up and lose 500 grand or more at a time and point fingers and have you sign NDAs and everything's proprietary and nobody wants to share information. And you're just like,
well,
what
can
the
I
fuck?
ask you something that's kind of then, you know, going unspoken? It's cost of production. I mean, because while we're sitting here asking you, well, you know, this is some of the things that hit me when I was up there with you, because I had the same exact reaction Mark had when I saw your greenhouse was, wow, I want one. And, you know, suddenly I'm sure we all feel that when you walk in. I actually would love to, because I would love one to grow stuff other than cannabis because it's just that cool.
Yeah.
But my question is this, is, you know, at what point does the cost of production get figured into this? Like, dare I ask you, how many, you know, and if I'm being crass, let me know. But how many pounds can somebody expect to get out of, you said that was 60 by 40?
This is a 24 by 60 and people should be getting anywhere from 75 on the minimum up to 110 out of a greenhouse like this.
But
Right
that's
there.
a vegetative yield. So how much resin should they get out of the greenhouse? Those are the numbers I want to hear.
Hold on, we could do that math. We could.
What strain?
Of course we could do that math.
I could do that math for you. I just need a minute. But hold on, on your
I
low
want
side,
to know the number of trichomes.
I can't do that math. I can't do that math. But can you go back to what the low side of the harvest was? Did you say 60?
75. So in our the way we see it is 1,000 square feet should be getting at least 50 pounds per harvest. And so this greenhouse is 1440 on the square feet. So that's why I say 75 would be the minimum in this greenhouse.
I'm already trying to consider how much of rock I'm going to have to blast out to fit that 24-foot wide unit in my backyard, because that's just like right behind my house with the ocean view over the house.
Oh, man.
Telling ya.
Oh, that would be epic.
With a drone, we'll be doing.
Yeah. That would be epic.
It's always been a dream. I have a federal license here in Canada, so I'm legally allowed federally to grow 100 plants, 99 plants.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the perfect size for that, I think.
Right?
Yeah. And then also benches.
Well, that's
so
why I'm
we
trying
can
to
get
figure out the resin content, because I'm not allowed to have 75 pounds. However, I'm allowed to have 10 pounds, just under 5,000 grams, but it can be hash or concentrate. So all I really need to get out of the greenhouse is my 5,000 grams of concentrate, and boom, I'm good.
Well, technically, Mark, at 70 grams per pound, 75 pounds comes in at just over 5,000 grams of concentrate. At 15%, at a 15% return, at 15% of its oil.
Dude, that's I kind of had a feeling. I'm not gonna lie. Kind of had a feeling.
Yeah, and in a greenhouse like this, you could essentially do a sea of green, but you could pull out, be feeding it a quarter at a time. So you could put in, a certain amount of plants and then a couple weeks later put in another batch, so that way you're constantly harvesting. And I have people in Santa Cruz that have a cement pad and they have their grow bags on casters, and they're constantly moving them down the way, and so they're always harvesting every week out of one end of the greenhouse and feeding it at the other end. And so you could probably keep your plant numbers up and your harvest within your range in something like that.
I would also have to do the giant pots or something, because it's all bedrock. Even putting earth, good soil up there, it would just make more sense to have them in compartmentalized pots to grow it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it's gone for light dep. People that do light dep want to have 5 harvests a year, and the only way it seems to do that is in a container, because when we do the earth beds, or even raised beds for that matter, people are bringing in whatever size plants, but they're letting them, take 2 weeks to get out of root shock, maybe even veg them a little more. Then they flower them. Then they got to come in and harvest, pull all the old roots out, amend the soil, replant. And so they're looking at three harvests per year versus a container gardener that looks at this as the flowering house only, pulling 5 harvests a year out of this.
Well, my license here doesn't allow me to sell any of the final products, so there would be no reason for me to do a secondary or a third harvest. But I'd love.
So you could just do the greenhouse.
Well,
I could do the greenhouse, and then I could grow food, like all the lettuce and salads that my wife loves to eat, and peppers and cucumbers that my kids eat like cookies. I would love to be able to grow all of those things right behind my house. Sorry, go ahead, Todd.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in a sense, it's easy to set up what I would call it, and I do it indoors, a perpetual harvest system where you have your flower rooms. Because, when I first saw outdoor growers like suddenly seeing light depth as an epiphany, I just chuckled, and it's like, yeah, I do that in a bedroom, but the reality is just once you have this thing set up on a photo period of like 7 in the morning to 7 at night, you can just augment it with lights that come on in the morning, go off during the midday, come back on at night, and then you can just feed this thing forevermore, putting in a few plants on a weekly basis that makes the whole thing manageable. And then your harvest would come out in just as routinely a basis based on the rhythm of the plants you put in, especially if you started working it down to just a few strains that were all basically doing the same pattern. So you could actually just rock this thing constantly if you were coming from a place of having a clean mother room and a clean clone room. Because now you're just going to feed it with your own genetics, and the flowers just come out the back. And you can even have moving tables that just bumped.
Got to have some food in there too, though. Pangea's asking to ask about positive pressure greenhouse setup.
Yeah, positive pressure is fine too, but what we're dealing with is fans that are on pretty much all the time. I mean, negative pressure is what I have in this greenhouse right here. And what negative pressure is pretty typical for most greenhouses. When you're using mechanical ventilation means exhaust fans and intake shutters. And so the greenhouse has to be sealed up nice and tight for mechanical ventilation to truly work really good. And so when the greenhouse is sealed up nice and tight and the exhaust fans at that end of the greenhouse turn on, the only entry point for air is the louvers right here at the end of the greenhouse that I'm sitting on. And then we have what's called an air exchange. The National Greenhouse Manufacturers Association standard says that we need to have 1 air exchange per minute. So that's moving a shitload of air out of a given greenhouse at a time. And so when you have negative pressure going on in a greenhouse, that means that if you're outside of the greenhouse and let's say there's a pinprick or you open the door for that matter, you can feel the air rushing in. So a lot of people would say that are big positive pressure pushers as well is that if there's a little bug crawling around the outside of the greenhouse and it walks across the roof and gets near that hole or that opening, it sucks the bug right inside. And that's, that could be very true. So with positive pressure, what we do not have are the intake shutters bringing air in. We have the exhaust fans, but they're actually pointing into the greenhouse rather than out. And so they're actually taking air. And sometimes you've seen in a greenhouse, there's a big plastic duct that comes through the center of a greenhouse, and it has a bunch of holes on it. And so what that is the positive pressure duct coming through, so all the air is coming in through that sock and it's blowing air into the greenhouse. So if you were to go back to that bug on the outside of the greenhouse coming up on that same little hole, the bug wouldn't be able to get in because all the air is blowing out, so to speak. And so positive pressure is popular right now, and a lot of people are talking about it and into it because bugs and pests are a problem. But like I said, not everybody's been listening to what we're laying down. We've been around 11 years, but we've been dealing with cannabis in the summer only, whereas all the other greenhouse companies might have been around for 40 years and not dealing with cannabis, but that's what a lot of people are listening to or going to. So, I mean, you know, I have a lot of people that are also looking for affordability, so they go to other greenhouse companies, and sure, the other greenhouse companies will talk you out of a ridge vent, will talk you out of the better plastic and get the cheap, clear material, whatever it is to save a buck, sell the greenhouse and get you going. And where I'll stop and go, no, that isn't going to do your plants right. You're going to run into this problem. We're really trying to show people what's happening with cannabis in the summertime under or in these greenhouses, so that they don't run into these stumbling blocks and go, oh, well, I need a chemical, I need a positive pressure, I need all these other things. You know, there's a lot of research and stuff coming out of Colorado, and Colorado's kind of in its own bubble because Colorado, especially Pueblo, where all the greenhouses and a lot of growing is really low humidity. So what you can do in Pueblo, Colorado, and wet walls and cooling and environments in a greenhouse is a lot different than the people in upstate New York, people in the Emerald Triangle, Oregon, or even the Pacific Northwest for that matter. What we do in the Pacific Northwest, Colorado people, or we can't do what the Colorado people can. So I've even seen greenhouse quotes from other greenhouse companies that come across my desk, and I look at them and I go, oh my gosh, like, what are they trying to do to you? And then what we do is revise the quote, and then they'll take that quote over to the other greenhouse company, and that greenhouse company will revise their quote to mimic what we're trying to do or what we're laying down, because everybody realizes that, you know, you can't just do this standard parameter everywhere. You have to really look out for what's going on. And luckily for cannabis, it just wants to be out in the nice sunny day and not overheated and not all this bullshit over it. And if you support it, like I talked about, by not trapping too much air and letting it overheat, by not using the wrong colors for the grow bags in the ground. I've seen ground cover, black ground cover up to 180 degrees on an 87-degree day. So, I mean, we know that it creates a lot of heat where the white ground cover is only 99 degrees. I didn't have to use any electricity to cool that surface down. I didn't have to cool any air to do that. And so I see the same thing with this little tool right here in the greenhouses pointing at the plants themselves. And so if I can keep the plants cooler, we know that we don't have to cool the air in order to do that. And unfortunately, too many people out there just want to do all this stuff and think that cannabis is really dangerous. It's all hard, finicky, and, you know, it takes all this, you know, stuff, and it actually just needs support. And if you support it, it'll grow like a weed.
You know, I've seen my friends in Holland take their, you know, Grodan and their recirculatory systems outside into their greenhouses and set up like that as if it were an indoor room and have really great results. And I'm thinking about it now and thinking, well, with water chillers and the fact that they were basically pumping through Hydroton and Grodan, which you really can't overwater for those watching, you know, because it's always going to maintain about 20% oxygen. So they were able to really keep their root base cool and controlled, and probably, you know, didn't have the transpiration that you're talking about, because in a way they weren't locked into black pots or anything like that. That was actually heating up their root base and causing their plant to not have their feet in the kiddie pool, as you kind of used as a metaphor, which I think is a great metaphor. But in that sense, it doesn't really work so well in a soil solution, because you've got to dump the water in and then wait for it to naturally evaporate. But in a hydroponic solution, you're actually able to, if you see a problem, maybe chill your water a little bit more to try to compensate for the increase in temperature on the outside. So, you know, maybe more people might be looking at, now that it's legal, into doing more plants in these, you know, in Grodan and controlled situations, and, you know, mitigating these problems right from jump.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to plant temp and air temp, and everybody pays attention to air temp. And if we paid more attention to plant temp, you'd see more results or more actual helpful information. Because again, we're walking around in shoes and socks. You know, some of these greenhouses are encouraging solar gain. With too clear of a cover, the plants get more sun, so they're actually warmer than the air temperature, but nobody knows that because we're not pointing and shooting at the plants. When I teach at Oaksterdam, they have a little grow room, a grow tent. You know, it's like a 3x5, it's a tiny grow tent, and it's got one of these little tiny fans in there, bzzz, you know, buzzing, and there's only like 3 or 4 plants in there, and there's usually one plant that's like dancing in the wind like this, and the other plants are standing still. And so even when I'm teaching the class, I'll point and shoot at those indoor plants. And the plant that's dancing around like this is always 3 to 5 degrees cooler than the plant that's sitting still, receiving no air at all. And so my whole thing is yeah, you can keep the water cool, but they're usually with good soil. They're in cool soil as it is. If you're hydroponic, you're keeping the water cool in that regard. A lot of people are going to these capillary mats that I've noticed now too, and those hold or keep the floor wet, but they're also very black. So when they cycle off, you know, that water gets immensely hot and then it cycles back on. And so again, the color is what's doing that.
You know, a long time ago in Positronics, when you walked by one of our rooms, it was a show and grow. We actually, the way they built the air circulation was by taking large PVC pipes and going up to the ceiling with fans in them pointing down, and then they shot down to about 3-inch PVC pipes, and they had holes drilled in them all along the base, and this thing sat like it was like a little skeleton inside of their grow room, and it blew the warm air that was up top down to the roots and kept the air circulating really well. And anyone who went to Positronics in 95, 94, 96 would have seen what I'm talking about. But it was a really great way of avoiding exactly what you're saying happening.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Now they have vertical
solution.
Yeah, they have vertical airflow fans now and a lot of different things to stir this air up and to move it around. But a lot of that has to do with people that are trapping air and storing energy, because again, greenhouses are supposed to trap air, store energy, and heat things up. And so a lot of the science and a lot of the things that people have or go for or from have to do with that winter mode, aspect. A lot of pictures you see of greenhouses have the air coming in from down below and circulating out the top or whatever. That'll happen when I'm in here and the ridge vent on the greenhouse is closed and I open it, because you can feel the warm air escape. But in the middle of the day, when it's 100 degrees and you walk in the threshold of the door of the greenhouse, it's also going to be 100 degrees. But the difference is going to be using this tool to prove that those surfaces are cooler. Because if you go shoot the outside surfaces, the gravel, the plants, the grow bags, they're all going to be way warmer. And we know for a fact those plants are transpiring because A, the condensation inside of a greenhouse is a dead giveaway. And B, if you walk through the threshold of a door of a greenhouse and it feels warmer than the outside temp, then we know we have solar gain in some of these issues that we're trying to relieve. And most people's default, like I was saying at the beginning, is to turn on fans, to do all these other things. And mine is just take away the greenhouse effect, use the proper greenhouse cover, get a few circulation fans in here, and the plants are going to do great. The white ground cover and the tan grow bags for sure. And I mean, I've had people come to me and it's kind of funny. They're like, it changed my life. I'm like, what? You were successful, or you didn't have to have PM or whatever it is. And it's just basically the plant's response to, being in a hostile environment. And that's what greenhouses can be.
Glasshouse Grown is asking what your suggested leaf temp in a greenhouse is.
Well, the funny thing is like my whole suggested leaf surface temp is anything cooler than the outside air temp. On a hot summer day, when it's 95, it'd be good to see the leaves down to 85. If it's 105, I've seen plant leaves down to 87 and in the 90s. And what happens is, like I was saying, at that moment, then the circulation fans on back here are making the plants dance a little bit in that fresh air, and they can even cool more. I've seen plants 3 to 5 degrees cooler that are moving around versus the plants that are standing still. And so I just want to make sure that we're creating an environment for plants so that they're not overheating and causing themselves to sweat. And usually they do just fine in those conditions. And so in the wintertime, we also look at leaf surface temp and soil temp. Ideal soil temps in the wintertime would be 69 to 70 degrees, because anything below 55 degrees, we don't have nutrient exchange. And so people in the wintertime also do not pay attention to the soil temp and the plant temp. And so when I get the greenhouse up to 80 degrees in the wintertime, when it's 30 degrees, let's say, outside, the leaf surface temp will also be 75 to 80. But the minute I turn the heater off or open the door to the greenhouse, the leaf temp goes back down to where the soil temp was. And this winter, my soil temp was 46 degrees all winter long. I got into the 30s on some of the snowy, colder nights, but I'm just growing kale and lettuce and a bunch of stuff out there. And so using the infrared thermometer and a 6-inch soil probe in the wintertime will also tell you what your plant temp is versus the air temp. I had people in the wintertime have 30-degree air temp outside, 69 to 70 degree soil temps, and then the air temp inside the greenhouse was 55, and they did really well. Yeah, most people that have cold soil temps, the plants just grow really larvae and don't grow dense buds, but it's great for washing, because a lot of people are like, it's super tricky, it's really, you know, terpy. So in the wintertime, you definitely don't get the weight, but you'll get the terps, unless you boost that soil temp. And how do you do that? Well, there's radiant heating systems. It's good to work with a greenhouse company that does those professionally, not some concrete guy that's just going to lay some tubes in the ground, because there is a heated calculated loss. And if you don't do that right, you could be spending a lot of money on natural gas or propane. And so heating the root zone is really important, one way or the other. We have lots of solutions for that. We don't have to get into that right now. But nevertheless, air temp doesn't heat up. What's that? Okay.
That's a good subject. Hey, I'm enjoying this. It's great.
Okay, so I mean, I have people that don't know how they're going to grow in this industry, and so they come to me and they go, "I want a greenhouse," and then they go, "Well, I need heating," and I go, "How are you going to grow?" And that's where the conversation stops. I literally try to get investors and growers to come here and look at their greenhouse options, because investors are writing the checks, growers are trying to figure out what they want, and I can talk to both of them at the same time and they can figure it out. I've had a few arguments here too, because when we get to the heating question, the investor guy's like, "Come on, grower guy, like, what the fuck are we doing?" And so when the grower doesn't really know, they start looking at me going, "Yeah, 30-gallon grow bags, right, Eric?" And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It's really not my problem, and so when people decide how they're going to grow, then we can design the heating system. So historically, it's been in 30-gallon grow bags just on the ground. And so we can lay little rubber tubes on the ground that actually run heat inside, hot water through them. And you can put up to a 150-gallon grow bag right on top. And then you can also heat the benches. So if you're doing benches, you can heat a bench instead of the ground. And so there's lots of ways to do that. And part of the problem is people come to me and go, "Oh, well, I'm going to actually grow on the ground now, and then I'm going to go on benches later." And the problem is that if you put the heat in the floor now, and then you go to benches, you're going to wish you had the heat on the benches. So I'll even tell people a lot of times, if it's springtime, like I was saying, and you're going to get your greenhouse up for the summer, why don't you pull off a couple harvests and come back to me in September once you get your established your grow method or how you're going to do it, and then we can design the heating system. Because a lot of times with these partnerships and people getting into it, everything changes so rapidly that it's good to know that you have a little time and maybe an option to grow some plants and create a harvest before you got to buy XYZ.
No, I totally appreciate you talking to us. When I was up there with you, Eric, I was so blown away to see, honestly, the setups you guys had. And, just for the record, when you were showing us the other greenhouse, it was the lighter colored. You're not using black fabric pots. You're using actually light tan and even lighter colors than that. And it's to deflect the heat from the root base, correct?
It is, yeah, totally. I've seen with a black grow bag 15 to 20 degree higher surface temps than the tan. And so when we're trying to save water, we talk about evaporation and plant transpiration. You know, those two things, you know, aren't really to make the plant grow. Evaporating water is just going away. Transpiration water is keeping the plant cool, and it's going into the atmosphere. And so at the end of the day, you know, we're saving water, we're supporting the plant, we're creating a photosynthetic availability rather than a survival stage that it, you know, they go through. And a lot of people would say, well, we use shade cloth to help, you know, mitigate some of that. And shade cloth a lot of time restricts light. And so the test they've done in Mexico with tomatoes especially is that the more light that they restrict, the more leaves the tomatoes grow rather than fruit. The more sun exposure or light that they get, the more sets of fruit that they have. And so they did a lot of testing, in particular with these greenhouse covers that we're using, where they would open the roof and let the natural sun come in and then close the roof at the heat of the day or when the UV was its most intense. And they were able to have tomatoes grow for up to 8 months and harvest off of them, where the outdoor tomatoes were done after one picking and the shade house tomatoes just constantly pumped out tons of leaves and less yields. And so using shade cloth on a greenhouse for cannabis might seem like, you know, what the nursery industry taught us to do, but what I'm seeing is that it's restricting light, even though it might give a relief to the plant for a short amount of time. But most people that are using shade cloths on cannabis greenhouses these days are using it on the exterior, and it's also the color black. And so then it absorbs a ton of heat. And so one of the things I'm running into is I see people that also get a double wall inflated greenhouse poly. So what there is a squirrel cage inside the greenhouse fan blowing air into the two layers. So it's great for the wintertime because you're making an insulated barrier, so to speak. And if you're warming up the greenhouse inside, you're warming up that air in between so that it can help shed snow and protect the greenhouse. But what happens with double layers in the summertime is that air in between is trapped air, and the sun is beating down and that air is heating up. And so then you have a greenhouse inside that maybe you're even running cool air into that's actually feeding that fan that's going into that hot dead zone in between the two layers. And then people put up shade cloth also, and the shade cloth is restricting a bunch of light, but it's black, so it's encouraging a bunch of solar gain all along. You know, I saw somebody with even black ground cover and the black plastic pots, and I'm like, why are you cooling the air in order to, you know, help relieve the plants of all this surface tension that's being created by all the colors you chose, when all you really needed to do was, you know, get a single layer for the summertime, spread the light uniformly, and maybe use some white ground cover and tan grow bags. I mean, it would save a ton of electricity, because again, that cooling system is just mitigating surface temps, you know, and I've already figured out how to cool the surface temps without using any cooling systems. So, I mean, I don't know. I see a lot of people chasing their tail and working really hard, and then the end of the season, the plants are yellow as can be, and everybody goes, it's the fade. And I'm like, it's the what?
Spending more time
lockout?
Spending more time trying to fix their own mistakes.
And the plants are just using that water, doing what they're supposed to do. The dehumidifiers are collecting it, and the fans and all this stuff. And then the plants are just going, my God, am I done yet? Here's my yellow leaf. Here's my thrip traps.
But you know what? This is what's going to happen though when you start getting in the cost of production and the water and the energy. It's all expensive, and you know, and if people don't learn how to use it wisely, they're going to be just jacking up the cost of their product and eating into their bottom line, and they'll have to learn how to adjust, or their competitors most definitely will. So,
well, and all these things that are happening, there's causing the PM and the mold though, so they're already losing. You know what I mean? Like it's already a done deal before they got started, and they all spend a ton of money to figure it out, and they hire a bunch of people too to come help fix the problem. And then they make everybody sign NDAs and fucking keep it proprietary, and then none of us can go around and actually help fix the problems or help the community learn from these mistakes, because nobody wants the finger pointed at them.
One of the things that I really, when I met you some years back, I really enjoyed about you is you were just so forthcoming with information that people needed, and you weren't standing in front of me trying to sell me a greenhouse. You were standing in front of people, teaching them how to use things that they may already have had. And the information I knew from my experience that you were telling people was fucking spot on and great. And I was learning from you talking, and I was just really, you know, guys like Mel Frank and others, and Rob Clark and Sam sitting there, they disseminated so much positive information about cannabis that I, as a student, couldn't be helped but to be in awe of all the things they shared. And like, you know, I really recommend, I mean, honestly, I hope you do a book. I hope you do more of what, because if you just encapsulated what it is you lay out, it's so informative and so helpful. I mean, you're telling people how to make how many pounds per square foot, and just if they listened and they applied it, they would be having great results. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. You're enabling a lot of people to be self-reliant, and I fucking love you, and I applaud you for it. I really do.
Hey, I appreciate you for saying that, and I appreciate everybody on this panel and Hash Church and what it's been going on for a while. I try to watch it all the time, and everybody's, you know, a big hero here, or pioneers, and so I'm lucky to be on here and share the info that I do have. And it's taken a lot of time to kind of put it all together, but you know, most of the information, if not all of it, is for free and it's out there. And like you said, I'm not trying to sell a greenhouse as much as I'm trying to sell success. Yeah. And if I can sell a greenhouse out of the deal, that would be great, because that's what I really am supposed to be doing. But you know, I love cannabis. I can't help it, you know, and I don't want it to be tainted and sprayed and fucked up, you know, like it's got to be good. And people need to know that there is, you know, ways out there to do that.
Right. You know, and this is another thing.
One of the #1 ways is use resistant varieties. Everybody's using varieties that are not resistant.
Well, and would you say, or would anybody agree that some of the breeding nowadays, because of the influx of, you know, the industry and brands, and everybody's got seeds and whatever, I mean, it's hard to necessarily find great seeds or things that maybe haven't been bred through previous uses of Eagle 20 because people didn't know. You know, I have people that have popping beans from 2 years old that are having variegated leaves going, oh yeah, I remember using Eagle 20 back in the day. And so, you know, the flowers don't test positive, but the concentrates do.
I got variegated leaves in different populations all the time. I never used Eagle 20.
And I believe that to be true, but the people that we call out nowadays are using it, and especially the people that are using the OG or the Kush back before there were seeds for it, were heavily using Eagle 20, and the variegated leaves were like in every mom and cut like at the time. It was pretty staggering. So then when I asked the question, just because I'm asking or I DM somebody, they end up going, yeah, we used it. And a lot of it has to do with a Kush type of strain, nothing else.
Well, no, there are a lot of plants that are circulated in cuttings right now that are susceptible, and just for the sake of the conversation, it's both systemic as well as it is environmental. So a plant that doesn't have it can become into contact with it environmentally and can pick it up, and it has to be what happens every time. But once it picks it up, you could try to wipe it out, and unfortunately, it can get below the level of getting wiped out, and it can carry on to its offspring. And that is where it's problematic.
You can also see plants which, I mean, like populations imported from Afghanistan, for example, sometimes 3/4 of them would have mildew. I mean, just unbelievable. Yet hazes planted right next to them didn't have one single bit of mildew.
Wow. Well, now that people can start growing equatorial varieties for longer periods of time, because they don't have to worry about their crops getting cut down. You know, a lot of what happened, a lot of what dictated growing in the past was how fast it would grow and how heavy it would yield, because it was just such a risk. And now that the risk is somewhat, if not altogether gone, I think people can start focusing on plants that take longer than 10 weeks to flower, and they can start really, you know, practicing the art of flowering so that they can keep the plants in a clean environment, you know, throughout a long flowering period. And like I'm saying, even introduce more plants on an ongoing basis into their groom without having to cut everything down and clean everything out every harvest, because every single harvest, it turns into a mess for them. You know, so I think good greenhouse management has to come into the conversation, because if we don't have this kind of preventive maintenance, you're always going to be chasing your tail and not really enjoying the fruits of what something like that could bear.
If enough people grow enough narrow leaf drug varieties, eventually there will be clones that, for people who don't mind the, like you say, longer flowering period, of varieties that basically do never get powdery mildew.
There already are. I think part of the issue is that everybody's like Eric said, everybody's growing the Kushes and the OGs, which have.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a terpene profile that's susceptible to molds and mildews.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one. I mean that's been the thing, is everybody wants that gas in Southern California, and so it's turned into this frenzy. But the plant itself has never been a real stable plant, and so then people turn it into, you know, it probably was when Todd had it back at the mansion or something. But I mean,
yeah, I didn't have PM in the 90s with.
That's what I mean. It didn't start with it.
No, well, no, and that's why I say that it had to pick it up along the way. But once it picked it up, it was perpetuated into the cuttings and further cuttings. And
what I didn't realize is the tissue culture. You can actually take some pretty sick plants and do a tissue culture and save that plant and get rid of the, or you know, I don't know.
You can clean up the disease in the plants, but you can't change whether it's susceptible or not. The wrong varieties will be susceptible even if you clean them up.
Yeah, it's the susceptibility. But you can clean them up, and you don't need to go down to tissue culture to clean it up, but you can do it that way.
If you do small enough meristem cuttings, you can sometimes clean them up.
That's interesting.
Hey, I got an idea, Eric. Would you come on again and maybe even take questions from people in the chat and stuff? Because
I'll come on again and take questions. I'm down. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, it's springtime, and a lot of people are into filling up their greenhouses. So
yeah,
I think that it is just kind of like a cool time. It's topical. And
would you guys mind if I plug an event we're having here?
Of course not, dude. In fact, people wanted to know both your website, your IG, and then any event that you have going on. Of course, let us know about it.
Okay, cool. I appreciate you guys letting me do that. May 30th, here at Forever Flowering Greenhouses, in this greenhouse, we set up over 100 chairs, a big screen, and we have Elaine Ingham coming. She's the pioneer, kind of a compost tea, I guess you could say. And so she's going to be speaking. And then we also have her advisor, I call her disciple or her protege or whatever, is this guy, Scott. And he's been spending 3 years studying cannabis in no-till and organic production in Colorado, Arizona, all over. And so when people say the soil food web, that's actually Elaine Ingham's company or term. And so a lot of people are dropping the microbe soil food web no-till, or they got biology compost tea thing, but nobody's around with a microscope actually quantifying the numbers, because there is a mathematical equation to the soil food web. It's not just make tea and I got my, we're good. And so yeah, there it is. Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's here. That's right behind me.
That's cool, dude.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Very cool.
So yeah, May 30th, if you go to Instagram, all one word, Forever Flowering Greenhouses is my Instagram handle. You can go to the link in my bio for tickets. We do have food trucks on site. It's an all-day event. It's very interactive. Elaine speaking, Scott speaking, and he's basically using 3 years of data he's collected in this mathematical equation on the soil food web and letting us all know where the cannabis industry is right now. Yep, there it is. And it's kind of startling news. Unfortunately, the cannabis industry isn't even in the ball game or the parking lot, I forget as he puts it. The soil food web is here, and the cannabis industry in the last 3 years of everything he's tested isn't even in the screen. And so everybody that thinks they're into the teas and making biology and the soil food web are really far off. And he tells us all why. And Elaine's there to kind of quantify all of it, back him up. We can go over the numbers, the graphs, all the stuff. But you know, it's tough to learn some of that stuff. I mean, what happens to the microbes when you unplug the tea tank and they separate like oil and water? A lot of people start watering at the same plant every time and finish with the same plant every time. I mean, there's all these little nuances that go on under the soil just as much as topside. And so when I talked today, I talked about all the little nuances and things that go on with the greenhouses that are pretty obvious that we can pay attention to, that we just maybe hadn't been enlightened about. And now Scott is doing the same thing underground with the soil food web. And then we do a little vibing at the end talking about the greenhouses topside and below. And it's a really great event. And I think anybody that is into compost tea, maybe never seen Elaine Ingham or any of that kind of stuff, should come to the event. We still have, I think, you know, it's over half sold out. We did it over a month ago, and we sold out over 100 tickets. So the community really, really wants this info. And that's why we're having the second one, so that people have a chance to come to it. And our website is lightdep.com. So Forever Flowering Greenhouses is the Instagram, lightdep.com. And the next event we will be at is the NCIA in Oakland. And also the same week, I'll be flying over to New York City for the Cannabis World Business Congress, or whatever it's called.
Nice. I can't wait till we're filming the video of you flying up here and building one of those in my backyard.
That will be awesome. Are you going to ever make it to down here? Are you getting... They won't let me in Canada.
I know. They won't let me in down there. Now, we can both do something called a waiver and get a waiver, and it makes it quite easy as long as you're not like a terrorist or something. You're generally be allowed in. And even with cannabis crimes, they let people go both ways. But I just got a little freaked out. I thought it was all going to be good. It seemed like America was all like, woohoo. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Sessions is announcing like no, we're going to hammer people down. I'm just like, why? I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that. Just
maybe things will change by December. And if there's any way, we set up a nice greenhouse at the Emerald Cup. We have it as a booth. It's a private lounge, a VIP lounge, so to speak. Nice. And so if there would be any way to do a live hash church at the Emerald Cup sometime, I'd be happy to give you guys 3 hours at the site in the booth back there to do that. It would be really cool to get all you guys in there, at least for a sesh, if not a church.
Oh, that'd be beautiful.
Is that house church starts at 9 a.m. and the Emerald Cup usually opens up at I think on Sunday 11.
Yeah, we could go in there. I have catered food, drinks, coffee, the whole deal. We can puff, it's great.
Get in a little early with the VIP hash church panelists.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
What's his name? Tim Blake, I think.
No, Tim.
Yeah, Tim's been on hash church. He's fantastic.
He'll be in the greenhouse with us, hanging out.
That would be ideal. Yeah, that would be something we could do. When is the next? That's not till December, right?
Yeah, that's not until December, but that's definitely a good time to get everybody together. We all have to urge
them to start doing a spring event, because that is just too great of a community coming together, and it kind of needs to happen twice a year at least.
Well, they're doing a Cannabis Country Fair now, and that's in July.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's starting this year. Tim's putting it on. It's called the Cannabis Country Fair. They actually are going to have cannabis entries and judging and the whole deal, and it's at the hog farm property where the old picnic used to be. And
well, let's all support that, because that's fantastic.
I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for an early impeachment, so I could potentially get up there by December. We'll go for we'll get an early impeachment. We'll see. Maybe just get rid of this whole lot of nut bar psychopath, sociopathic maniacs that are currently pretending to run the country. I don't know. I could be fake news, but I don't think I am. Anyway, guys, it's been a blessing to have Eric on here. Really great knowledge and information you dropped today, bro. It'll be great to have you back to answer some questions. D420K whipping up the medicine all show long. That was wicked, dude. Fucking awesome, bro. Thanks for coming in, Chimera. Etienne finishing it off with a dab. Skunkman Sam upside down. We got Indra in the house, who didn't say anything, but he had a good chat on the side. So thank you for coming in. Mark Shaldone, to pronounce your name properly, not Scal. It's not Scal.
Thank you, Mark.
Shal. It's Shaldone. And we
Dr.
appreciate Dr. Mark Sheldon, in fact. And of course, Todd McCormick, thank you so much, buddy, for bringing Eric in today. And Johnny B, who left, Dr. Natasha, who left, and anyone that I've forgotten. Of course, all the people viewing, the 800 plus people that watched live today, and the 8 to 10,000 that will watch in the upcoming weeks. Thank you, everybody, for watching Hash Church. Now, go tell your mom you love her. I'm going to go spend some time with my family. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Peace out.